hooked on a sound of that cypress, that Marley, that Willie, that funk, that method in red, man, that knocked in the trunk. I'm a nerd. Just like some cool, we teach in the nation about growing this herb. It can heal, it can help, it's a medicine, natural cure. What you heard is a government lie. Reefer madness, their tactic to scare you to try. Road we walk has been paid by the legends, so why keep it growing till the day that I die? This one is for the legends. I wouldn't be who I am today without the legends who paved the way. I keep it growing till I'm in my grave. This one is for the legends. They fought for me to have the right to grow. Stand in their ground so we could take control. Goes out to you when I pack this bowl. Legends.
He is known for his expertise on the molecular biology of medical cannabis and cannabidol. In the Weeds is beyond excited to sit down this week with Dr. Kevin Spelman, a scientist, clinician, educator, herbalist, writer, and the host of the Spelman Report. Dr. Kevin Spelman is an internationally recognized expert on the molecular biology and clinical therapeutics of botanical medicines and new product development. Dr. Spelman has also consulted for the Department of Defense on specific therapeutic outcomes using natural products. Dr. Spelman's research includes brain and ovarian cancer and clinical investigations, immunological studies, and chemical analysis on numerous medical plants. Dr. Spelman has published 27 scientific papers and 6 chapters. Tune in this Wednesday, January 13th at 4:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to In the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio live on Facebook. www.facebook.com/Prohibition Talk Radio.
All right, guys, here we go. We're off and running again, I guess. Looks like we're live. It's a really exciting show today. If anybody knows me in cannabis for the last few years, when we get talking about medical side of cannabis, I always talk about this guy, Kevin Spelman, right? So everybody's like who, what, where, when, and how. And years ago, he had sent me and forwarded me transcripts of his class on extractions, right? So, and as a lot of people know, and everybody on this panel hear me pretty much every week, kind of, you know, I'm like the broken wheel where I talk about where recreation and medical cannabis are way too overlapping, in my opinion, where we talk about cartridges and distillates and, you know, different extraction methods, and are they really providing the patient any sort of endocannabinoids, cannabinoid systems, any sort of relief in those areas, right? Or is it just so concentrated that it's just a THC and it's kind of like drinking whiskey for a broken toe? You know what I mean? It doesn't help anything, but it's going to make that toe probably feel a little better, right? And you a little warmer, and you overall, you know, in all these situations feel a little better, right? But it doesn't help anything. So this is where we talk about medicine, right? Where cannabis can be real medicine. So, you know, most, you know, old school people, and you know, we always talk about hash and bubble hash and different extraction methods, whether it's MCTs, CO2 extractions, ethanol extractions, and things like that. And what's really the best extraction for a patient versus the industry, right? Commercialized industries and stuff like that. So when I met Kevin, he was working with the government, and he was talking about the programs that he had run and the research that he had done, and then it was showing us the facts and things like that. So I'm really excited to have him on because we're going to dive deep into that. But first, you know, we're going to talk about who he is and how he gets into cannabis, because, you know, without people like him providing this research and backgrounds, we don't have anything to stand on, right? Especially in this day and age of where we're trying to get with legalization, right? We'll get into all this and here shortly. I just want to say hello to everybody. It feels like, you know, me and Tim were talking before the show. It feels like we haven't been able to see anybody in so long, right? Because of the COVID and everything going on. So I just want to say hi to everybody again. Welcome to another week of 2021, and it just is not. It's just getting crazier and crazier and crazier. 2020 has left us in the hopes of a better year, and hopefully we'll have that. It's a crazy day. If you haven't paid attention to news, I got all caught up in that earlier. So hopefully we'll see what's going to go on with our government here shortly. But hopefully, you know, we'll get this back to what we call normality here, right? I just want to say hello to Timothy Fair, Vermont Cannabis Solutions.
Joe.
He's our legal expert here in the panel. We also have Thomas Markham of Vermont Grow Coaching, our growers expert here on the panel as well.
Great to be here as always, Joe. It hasn't been the best week. I blew the head gasket of the Subaru yesterday, but I'm optimistic that today is a much better day.
Well, the good old car of Vermont, right? The official car of Vermont. If anybody knows the Subaru,
love it or hate it. It's a love-hate relationship.
Yeah, right. I want to give a big shout out and thank you for coming again, the Green Nurse, Sherry Tuckus and Nurse Mark. Hi, guys. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey.
If you guys don't know who the Green Nurse is, you can find them every morning, 8 o'clock on their Green Nurse page, doing their daily dose of AFA, where it's a bunch of information, and it's really great. It's really quick. It's 10, 20 minutes long, and it's a great way to start your day. So check those guys out. And they're doing a lot of great things, and there's a lot of great events coming up, and we'll get into all that as we get through the show. And again, I want to thank you to Kevin Spelman for joining us again from where are you now, actually?
I'm in Ashland, Oregon.
Oh, nice. So Oregon's a great place to be, right? Especially this time of year. So Kevin, for those people that don't know who you are, can you just explain who you are, where you're from, and then, like I said, how did you end up getting into cannabis and where you're at now?
Well, thanks for asking, and thanks for having me on the show first. And it's great to be, I love the team. And I don't think I've ever seen such a colorful introduction. So, so thank you. That was great. So I actually got into, I learned how to grow when I was darn young because somebody took me under the wing. But then I kind of diverged away from it because at the same time, I was actually studying medicinal plants and nutrients. And grew up with a lot of issues as a child, health issues that docs just couldn't touch. And so I learned pretty quickly to be somewhat self-sufficient in terms of treating myself. And so I actually practiced clinical herbal medicine for a couple of decades. And I would keep a bottle of tincture of cannabis, not in my clinic because of the potential legal issues, but outside of my clinic at home. And if I thought somebody needed it for, back then I was using it for chemotherapy, that I saw a lot of cancer patients. And so I would use it then. But through that, through this practice, I did almost 3 decades of clinical practice. And at my height, I was probably seeing about 50 people a week. And I know that's not a huge number compared to what physicians and FNPs do these days, but I was spending an hour to a half an hour with everybody. So it was those are big days, long days back then. And from then I went on to a PhD in biology. My PhD is actually what brought me back into the endocannabinoid system, because I was working on, at the time, we didn't know it was the endocannabinoid system. This is back when the endocannabinoid system was simply CB1, CB2.
PhD in biology.
What's that?
Oh, sorry about
that. I thought I heard some feedback or something. Sorry. So this is back in the days when, just the enzymes, the biosynthetic enzymes and the enzymes that broke down cannabinoids and endocannabinoids, and CB1 and CB2 were considered the endocannabinoid system, right? So back then, I didn't know I was working on the endocannabinoid system, but I was, and I got fascinated by lipid molecules, which of course is cannabinoids and endocannabinoids. And actually back then I was able to show a very novel target for echinacea, which you may know as a very popular herb and has been maligned by some of the clinical studies because they've been designed very poorly, which by the way, looks like a strategy to me and not necessarily good science. But I was able to show that it had a novel target, PPAR gamma, besides its CB2 target that it has. And so that was really great to have my hands back in that area. And by the way, back then we also showed the very first human trial on dandelion. We showed that dandelion was a diuretic, which everybody knows, but there was no human trial on it. So we actually ran a small human trial on it back then. And from there, I went to the EU. I went to Paris and was a Marie Curie fellow for a while. I worked on malaria with a number of plants that, interestingly, now I look back, had potential endocannabinoid activity. And from there, I went to a postdoc at NIH. And there's where actually we did some work on some more plants, but that would hit both CB1 and CB2. And one of those plants was xanthosxylum, which you may know as prickly ash. You may also know as Szechuan pepper. Turns out that these compounds, these acrylamides that tingle your tongue, give this trigeminal stimulation, actually have a pretty profound impact on CB2 and CB1. So that's kind of how I got into it. There I went into industry and have worked a couple of different R&D labs, both international and national. And these days I'm a formulator, researcher, educator, and writer and clinician. So that's what I do these days. So I just came off of a long stint being a CSO for a cannabis company. And so I, researched it. I've grown it. I've been all around the industry at this point, but it's a fascinating plant. And it's so fascinating to me because one of the things that's happening is medical providers are starting to pay attention to a medicinal plant. Now, in my book, it's one medicinal plant, but rather than thinking of cannabis as a gateway drug, I like to think of it as a gateway plant that shows healthcare providers that medicinal plants have potential therapeutic and efficacy with low risk of side effects.
Oh man, it's what you're doing, what you guys have done have been amazing. To even talk about like what you were saying, like back then when you were realizing a lot of this stuff, a lot of the science is fairly recent, right? I mean, I think the general mass of people don't understand that a lot of this actual real science, like when we talk about the endocannabinoid system, is not being taught in the medical field until, recently, and still in some areas not practiced at all, right?
That's right. Somebody did a fascinating study that I came across at Patients at a Time conference back in maybe 2016, 2015, somewhere like that. Somebody actually devised a study where they looked at the statistics. They did it right. They called medical schools and they posed as a student who wanted to go to medical school. And so they asked questions about what they taught. And one of their questions was, do you teach the endocannabinoid system? And I think 90% of medical schools were not even mentioning it. And one of the responses they got was they got the director of the medical school on the phone, or the dean, and he said to this potential student, posing as a student, said, if you want to know about the endocannabinoid system, you do not belong in this medical school. Now, if you think about the endocannabinoid system in itself, I see it as a pyramid, where the base of the pyramid supports everything else, right? And so for me, the endocannabinoid system is at that base of the pyramid. And then you've got the neuroendocrine immune system, and you've got all these other systems that build on top of that. But it is so incredibly prolific in terms of its activity and so responsive to so many different conditions. I have to say I'm a little tired of hearing about homeostasis and the endocannabinoid system, because I don't see it that way at all. I see it more as an allostasis. Allostasis translates as stability through change. And if you look at homeostasis in the body, there's really only three homeostatic systems. It's blood pH, oxygen tension in the blood, and then body temperature. Everything else is more allostatic. In other words, it's got to change a very significant amount to keep us stable. And this is something that I think is really highly missed. And now this allostasis model has turned into the resilience model because more people can easily relate to this idea of resilience. But to have resilience in our everyday lives, which obviously cannabinoids can be part of depending on what you're dealing with in your own health system, health structure, you really need to be able to make shifts in molecules in your body. And not just, they're not held in a tightly constrained range. They have to go out of that range to actually bring you back to balance.
Mm-hmm. No, it's amazing to hear you say that. A lot. What I mean, there's so many questions I got to ask you right now. I don't even know where to start. And I'm sure Mark and Sherry are just like, everything you're saying is what we've been preaching for a long time, which is great because I mean, obviously, you've hit every nail on the head. The education really isn't there. The support from the medical industry isn't really all there either. You know what I mean? There's still a lot of stigmas going on. We have talked to nurses. Actually had somebody reach out to me today about a nurse that's been trying to get into the cannabis industry and she doesn't really know where to start. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I recommended the Green Nurse Group, obviously, the American Cannabis Nurse Association. I mean, there's lots of areas where nurses can get involved, but it's a risk, right? Because a lot of these things are federally funded, correct?
It is a risk. And I have to say, in terms of my own career, I kept my interest and my actual work on cannabis quiet until about 2016, because it could have changed my life for the worse in terms of being able to work or, find a job, or these days I consult strictly, but yeah, it was nice to be able to let go of companies and regulations and government issues and just do my own thing and be able to talk about it. But it is a risk, unfortunately. And even to this day, it's more normalized, but still there are states, obviously, that although they may have laws, there's no way of getting it, right? So yeah, it's still a huge risk. And what are we at? 43 states now with cannabis laws?
Fully, yeah. I believe it is 43 states.
I think it is.
How you
So we
define
still have
that,
7.
whether it's low THC, you have CBD. But yes, I mean, at this point, practically all states have some form of legalized cannabinoid. I think there's a handful that don't have any yet. But you're absolutely right, Doc. I mean, a professional stigma with attorneys too. 2 years ago, when I left my firm and jumped into this, I had colleagues telling me I'd be disbarred. We just had a decision in South Dakota. Their state bar saying lawyers can't represent the cannabis industry. It's an ongoing struggle.
Which is amazing, right?
It is absolutely amazing. So what do you do when you run into legal trouble, which as a cannabis company, you're very likely to do, right?
It's like, we're really worried about all of the possible money laundering and shady goings on. So we'll keep it a cash-only industry and not give you access to banks. Come on now.
I know. There's a lot of oxymorons going on.
So now you bring it to the medical side of things really interestingly, right? Because obviously you came from that side and you've done a lot of this unique research, right? When I met you originally, it was research on with extractions and things of that nature. And I don't know if you remember that course or not, or the things we discussed, but it was like these research. Small batches, small numbers, small participants, and what you're finding and even what you're reporting has been skewed throughout the process, right? Because this is what we have to talk about, right? This is years ago now, and through funding and federal aid, do you think a lot of these reports get misconstrued that that most scientists would be working on?
Well, I think in terms of misconstrued, I would trace it back to the fact that if you look at the literature before about 1990, and even then you can still find this, but before about 1990, 1995, everything was based on harm, on cannabis harm, right? And then you actually started seeing there was still molecular biology going on, but nobody could understand that. Most people couldn't understand that, right? What they were saying. But after that, it started looking at, okay, there actually is some benefit here. And so I think there's a long history in medicine that suggests that medicine takes about 50 years to change. So you can imagine 2 decades isn't long. And I have to say, we've made incredible progress in 2 decades, but since the 90s, but we still have a long ways to go. That's 3 decades, isn't it? Since the 90s.
Yeah.
Right. It's going by fast, right?
It is going by fast.
That's the biggest thing for all of us is just like how quickly this is coming about, and then like this, where the support is or isn't, right? With that being said, when we do these processes and we do this research, one thing that I really want to get involved with, and we're going to get right into it, was like, the health benefits. Like, obviously you're working on the health side of things. And, we here on the show, Thomas, the Green Nurses, and Tim, we preach a lot of organic practices, know your growers, we're kind of all, little boutique cannabis junkies, I guess you could say, craft growers. We're here in Vermont. We take pride in our grows, and we believe in a good, solid medical system, right? Obviously, you've been working on it and in it for a while. Can we talk about that for a minute? What do you think we need to do on that note with where we're at, right? And how do people go about it? Because, like, for me, I guess what I was saying before, like I was saying to you before, it's like when we talk about dabs or other processes of utilizing your cannabis, whether it's, inhalation or, you're eating it or you're putting it on your skin, or, I'm trying to just make it as easy as I can for everybody to think about here. But like, there's lots of different ways to consume it, right? Whether, there's even, rectally, there's, all sorts of, I've seen eye drops recently, which blew my mind. I'm like, eye drops? Like, that's almost genius.
That was the original treatment for glaucoma. Yeah.
Which is amazing. And a lot of people don't realize, and again, I think a lot of people, because it's just of our generational gap since, we went to prohibition, right? Before, cannabis was used a lot, right? Because it was used in oils. It was mainly oil-based tinctures and things of that nature, right? It was never in flower form, if my research is correct, right? So it's either an additive or a medicine, but mainly in an oil-based, right?
Yeah, that's right. It depends on what country you were in terms of whether it was flower-based or not. I had a friend actually in Mexico City back in the 80s that had an asthma attack and got taken to the hospital, and he didn't have his inhaler. And they kept trying to get him to smoke something. He kept pushing it away. And finally, he took a hit out of desperation because he was really to the point where it was going to be a code, code 3. And he basically realized he was taking a hit of cannabis, and it opened his lungs up.
It's amazing. Yep.
So depending on where you were.
That's a great story, because actually I have asthma, and a lot of people are like amazed that I smoke the amount that I smoke. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a blunt smoker. I know it's not the healthiest thing. I preach a lot of health and love for cannabis, but everybody has a crutch. I agree. It's just one of those long time things that we're working on.
Somebody very wise once said to me, "Manage your addictions." Yeah. They didn't say we don't have addictions. They said manage your addiction. So what is it? Is it art? Is it sex? Mm-hmm. Is it drugs? Is it alcohol? Is it like manage your addiction?
Sugar, food. I mean,
exactly. Sugar, right.
Yep. I think we talked about diabetes last week with the green nurses, and it was just, it's amazing to understand the science behind how cannabis can really, again, you talk about the endocannabinoid system, right? The green nurse uses their umbrella as a great example. It's kind of like almost the same example as you use, which is great. But, everything starts with this endocannabinoid system. We've had Dr. Bob on where he teaches us about all the balance, right? Everybody wants to have balance, and that's what we're looking for here. So with having balance and like homeostasis, right? Whether you're consuming cannabis or things like that, what is the best way, again, for a patient to really kind of approach cannabis, right? Because again, I talk about one of the biggest things at the time when we were talking, one of the biggest things going on in the country were vape carts, and that was one of those things for me that was just like, A, too many issues, and this was before the issue. B, for me, I was finding a lot of even like, these fakes, because, whether they're real out west or not, and they're great, they're not making it to the East Coast, or they're being faked out. People are buying the packages off Amazon. Me and Tom talk about this a lot, and how to be prepared and aware of certain products that, how do you tell? How do you know what's in that cart? And then again, the product in that cart, the metals, when they heat up, and everybody knows how metal reacts when it heats up, and what can happen in that situation. But when you talk about cart, I see so many patients resorting to carts, right? And then every time I see someone and I hear distillate, I think of Kevin Spelman, right? I think of the conversation that we had here in Vermont at Rosemary Gladstar's medical conference, which big shout out to Rosemary Gladstar, wonderful lady. If you guys don't know who Rosemary Gladstar is, please do some research. She's got to be one of the by far the most heavily regarded herbalist in our nation, right? And she has, what's unique about her, she has a farm here in Vermont that's very close to us. I was actually able to sit down with her and spend some time with her for that medical conference, which is amazing. And you really realize a lot about plants, right? And she's one will tell you just the electricity, how they can speak to you, how they can heal you. And we're not just talking about cannabis, right? The green nurses, they bring that approach every day too, because it's, about homeostasis, it's about balance, right? So, we have a great segment where these guys talking about processed foods and keeping your B12s and things like that. What about carts? What about what's the popular thing on the market right now? And is this medication? give me a little cannabis extraction education, right? Because what I took away from your course that day was the biggest thing was water extractions, right? And how, for me, looking at cannabinoids, where are we keeping our cannabinoids? How much are we losing in these CO2 extractions? How much are we losing in these ethanol extractions? Because for a while I've seen people just want carts for that hit, you know what I mean? And for a long time I was like, is this the alcohol that's just not getting run off properly from a really poor product, right, being made?
Right.
And that's what these people are feeling, because cannabis shouldn't feel this way, right?
Well, you bring up a really sticky issue here, because everybody's going to have a different opinion. I have to tell you, for medical use, I'm a real fan of tinctures, of either oil or ethanol-based tinctures. Now, how you do those is a whole nother issue, because you can end up with something that's basically just THC and or CBD, or you can end up with something that's really represents a full spectrum. And let's be really clear here, and I'm going to piss a bunch of people off, and I hope you don't get too many calls. But listen, distillate is not full spectrum. It's just not. If you want full spectrum, it's the bud, it's the flower. That's full spectrum, right? The second you choose, whether it's ethanol, whether it's CO2, whether it's oil, the second you choose a solvent to extract in, you have now fractionated the plant. By definition, you are leaving certain stuff out and you're bringing certain stuff in. And so we have to remember this. Everybody thinks ethanol gives you full spectrum. Well, to a point, it does. You'll bring in some water solubles, you'll bring in some lipid solubles, but you're still not getting everything. So you have changed that makeup, right? It's a little bit, think of it as light spectrum, right? There's certain sunglasses you can wear where you cut out like the UV portion. And there's other sunglasses you can wear that actually lets everything in. It's just darkened it. And so in a big way, this is what solvents are like. You cut out part of the spectrum, the phytochemical spectrum, if you will. And so even though this potentially can be problematic, I think that this is probably the most reliable way to get a good area under the curve. In other words, to get a long-lasting cannabinoid influence is by using some sort of tincture format. Topicals, I think, are really a viable way as well. And then, of course, there's oral sprays like Sativex, right? But people have oral sprays that are similar to this as well that can actually be good, especially for absorption. The problem is absorption, right? Depending on which studies you're looking at, you're getting anywhere from only 6% to hopefully as high as 20%. So that's a huge difference in absorption. And so there's ways to round that to deal with that. But yeah, extraction becomes a very huge issue because I've seen isolate called full spectrum. I mean, people just right? They just throw a label on something because they want to sell it and call it full spectrum, which, by the way, also goes for which cultivar you're, not strain, but cultivar, right? This strain is the incorrect term here. But whatever cultivar you're buying in a shop often gets changed depending on what's selling in the shop, right? So it's not Blue Kush anymore. It's it's whatever.
The names change very quickly and easily with a lot in our markets. Yep.
Yeah. So your terpene content, which is usually why people are buying different cultivars, changes as well. So you change the name, the terpene content doesn't change. It's the same. And so if you liked like a Kush or some other OG thing, it's just going to change depending on what shop it is, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked to Thomas, and we brought this issue up a lot, especially when it comes to distillates, is a lot of these distillates are blended, right? So it's like the actual profiles of the certain cultivars that we're looking for aren't really there. So when you're buying that cart, right, Thomas, like that, when we're buying that Gorilla Glue number 4 cart, it's really not Gorilla Glue number 4. It's
right. So
right?
you're getting distillate. So you're not getting any of the additional cannabinoids other than THC, unless you happen to come across a mixed distillate cart. But again, it's still distillate. It may be broad spectrum, but it's definitely nowhere near full spectrum. And 9 out of 10 times, the terpenes that they're using aren't full spectrum and aren't actually the terpenes that would have been available to you from that plant. So yes, the terpenes do provide some benefit, but not the same benefit that they otherwise would have in a full spectrum product. I mean, I do definitely still use carts. I don't know if you can see this one here. You notice it's a lot darker than most carts. That's because it's not distillate. I'm not going to chief on a distillate cart because all that's going to do is make me paranoid and make me really jittery and want to talk really fast. So for me, I use a nice full spectrum. See, I can't even call it full spectrum because it's still missing some of the cannabinoids and still missing some of the fats and lipids and stuff in it that it needs too. So it provides me a nice broad spectrum effect that can provide me a more well-rounded medicinal feeling, as opposed to that blast you in the head, let's get high sort of feeling. And I use that to help with tapering off and taking the edge off the Asperger's symptoms, as well as arthritic pain. And then I follow it up with tinctures, edibles, everything else throughout the day, because if I don't have a build-up of cannabinoids in my system, I don't feel right on a daily basis. And it has nothing to do with the inhalation portion, not with feeling high or anything, but that the cannabinoids are necessary for my body to feel normal. And for me to go on a daily basis without having some sort of pharmaceutical medication, that's what I have to do. So I'm a huge advocate for taking distillate carts off the market entirely. I don't think they should even exist. If you're a recreational customer and you're looking for that head rush, there's other ways to get it. And I don't think distillate's the way to do it.
Well, yeah, and I'm just going to pipe in too. I've actually seen some edibles being made with distillate, and I've actually seen patients that have taken edibles with distillate get really, really paranoid on just a 10 milligram dose. So,
Absolutely.
you know, that's one of the educational factors that when, as nurses, is that when you're looking at edibles, you want to know the type, you know, not just the THC, but what type of THC, where did it come from? Are there other cannabinoids in there, especially for patients that do have PTSD or anxiety disorders or have, you know, panic disorders? You know, you want them, you know, so that's really important. I've just seen that recently. You know, someone came to me and said, I can't believe I had a 10 milligram edible and it made me really paranoid, where I did a 10 milligram edible a week ago and I was fine. And so we had to do we did the investigation, and it was the reason why was because of the type of cannabinoids that was in that edible.
Yep.
And distillate made them paranoid.
This is what I see as the biggest issue right now in our industry and the cannabis industry is the dose is number one. Dose is the key, right? But number two, the irregularities that we see in dosing and the misunderstanding of manufacturers about what kind of dose they actually want or need to give patients is not as high as they seem to think it is. I mean, I saw a brownie that I bought in California that had 500 milligrams of THC in it.
What?
Right.
I mean,
God.
Right? It's just insane. Like, oh, that's definitely a trip to the ER, right?
Yeah.
Well, even
So-
Green out.
Well, typically those are made with a blend of different, you know, like butters and things of that nature. But like I was going to say, and Sherry hit the nail right in the head, was what the problem we're seeing with distillate is it's making it into everything across the board in our market right now, right?
Because it's easy. It's easy.
Because it's easy.
And but the couple things I think that I want to point out, I want to hear Kevin's reaction to is like when we talk about distillates, and you were saying that you know people are getting the anxious effect. You know, Thomas, I'd like to hear your I want to hear everybody's kind of opinion on this one, because for me it's like, hey, you know, when we're talking about blended distillates, it really kind of has a different, you know, what's coming through the shop at that time is going to be obviously the end result of what you're going to get. And then, you know, if it's a sativa kind of a week, then you're going to get that sativa kind of effect. And I hate to say it, sativa, because my next point of all this is, you know, depending on where they're getting their products from and how and when they take it down, right? Because this is another thing I want to talk about to people, because this is something like I've seen Gorilla Glue #4 go all over the map as far as the effect it's going to give you. I've seen it literally make people drool, and I've seen literally make people run through walls like the Hulk, right? And it, you know, and people are always, you know, we talk about cultivars and what to expect and the highs to expect, and this is where I think education comes into the biggest one of my number three thing is what that high, what the experience of that high is supposed to be, right? So we as educators need to tell people that when they take a dab, it's not like eating a brownie, and it's not like taking a 10 milligram piece of something, and it's not like a tincture versus an edible, which if you don't even do a tincture right, it's going to end up in your digestive system, and it's going to become an edible anyways, right? Because you have to keep it in your mouth. That's the trick. People kind of like, they swallow it, and it doesn't really get into their mouth, so it ends up in their liver, right? Because it's an oil or an ethanol, right? So for me, it's, do you think it's more of we have a blended weird issue that people aren't really expecting, especially when, especially with the variable, especially candies, carts, a majority of edibles, right? Because we don't know what's in it. And it's very rarely do you actually have the real strain that's in something. It's just mainly the terpene additive to some cheaper product that's blended or easy to get, or like you said, they call it a full spectrum and it's an isolate. It just doesn't work that way. There's so many bottles I pick up in this industry, and I'm like, this is what they're advertising. If you have any common sense, literally you read the bottle and it's all hypocritical, right? So that's where we talk about legalization issues, because then we talk about restrictions and then what governs that, right? We talk to Tim about this all the time. Like, how do people get away with this? There's no govern on it, right? We see the DEA coming out now and attacking people and going after people for false flags. But I mean, I talk to you, and it's like, why is the DEA really supporting the no medical backing right now, when we're obviously, we have these scientists doing these all sorts of different types of tests and variables and courses and educations, and it's like, you've written how many books now and how many chapters? Like, does that not count?
Another point to make, thanks for taking that there. Why does the DEA say that there's no medical value to cannabis, in other words, Schedule 1, when our government owns a patent, or did, it's expired now, owns a patent on neuroprotective effects, clearly medical effects, on cannabis, on cannabinoids? It just doesn't, it's schizophrenic. One hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. And let's face it, government always has, whatever country you're in, government always has issues. Anything that big is going to have a hard time organizing itself. But yeah, it just doesn't make any sense.
I have some good news. I just posted a post today about the Massachusetts Medical Association. So 8 years after the legalization of medical cannabis in Massachusetts, and 4 years after the adoption of recreational cannabis, the Massachusetts Medical Society has recognized cannabis as a medical therapy. That is awesome.
That is awesome. That's great.
Thank you for being up, Sharon. I was hoping to talk to you guys about that, because you guys did post that on social media. So if you guys want to check out the Green Nurse Facebook account, Instagram, it's all over the place. That's huge. I mean, we're seeing a lot more and more support. We're starting to see, and you guys can talk about it, Mark, especially. I mean, you're the president of the American Cannabis Nurse Association. We're seeing a major change in the stigma, right? We're seeing a shift where nurses are now more interested now than ever, correct?
Yeah, nurses are interested, but it's like we talked about earlier. There's still risk involved with being out in the open. So there are a lot of members who just honestly don't want to be recognized as being members, right? They're interested. They know that it's a medicine. They know that eventually we'll get there, but still their jobs are on the line. I mean, they can't come out and say, hey, I'm, a proud member of the American Cannabis Nurses Association. Whereas I can, because I don't work in a facility. So I'm not subject to testing, and, I'm in a legal state. So, it's a problem. It's a problem, Joe.
However,
the accreditation and support from the industry, right? That's where it's really the hard part, right?
That's what we're working towards.
Yeah. Well, here's the good news, though. And Mark and I talk about this every Monday morning on our Motivational Mondays, is about what motivates cannabis nurses to do what we do. And here's the bottom line. The National Council State Boards of Nursing in 2018, it is the governing board that allows nurses to get their licensure. They create the test. They came out with a call to action in 2018 that all nurses must have 6 essential areas of clinical knowledge when it comes to cannabinoids and the endocannabinoid system. So that's really, really powerful. Yeah.
That's great.
And so the other thing too is, so that's what I do is there's this 64 page, it's in the Journal of Nursing Regulations, the 64 page document. I have a copy of it. I have it on a PDF. We're giving it out left and right, because here's the interesting thing. Once you go down that rabbit hole of learning about the endocannabinoid system, you can't unlearn it.
You can't go back. That's right.
True, right?
It's the cucumber to the pickle. You're a pickle. You can't go back to being a cucumber.
It's amazing. It's incredible. It really, really is.
Right. And the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know, and that we're just scraping off the tip of the iceberg. We have so much further to go. And what an exciting time to be a nurse and a clinician, to trailblaze something that is going to save lives.
What's unique about our medical industry, and I want to throw this back to Rosemary, it's something that I had the chance to sit down with Rosemary for quite a few hours and interview her. And one thing, the biggest thing I took away was, and this was something she said off everything in our own discussion, because I was just like, being a chef, I went to culinary school. I've won photos. I worked for 5 stars, 4 stars. I've been the culinary guy, which was, I believe in farm to table. I believe in, healthy, good food. I believe in what that can promote to your body and your energy and that balance, right? But for me, I was always a weed smoker, but I never, like all of us, right? We never knew that, these cannabinoids could work with us and were going to provide us any benefit. I was just getting stoned and providing good meals. And because I was stoned, they were great meals and they tasted great and everything was beautiful because I was stoned, right? So it all works, right? It's in harmony. It's like musicians and chefs, and there's a lot of different trades I think you really need cannabis to run, right? But what was interesting for me and what really kind of knocked it home for me was, we think about witches, right? And we talk about witchcraft and how recent that really was, and how, we were burning women at the stakes and drowning them in rivers and stuff, because what were they doing? They were healing people with plants. They had the inner ideas and the inner knowledges of the things that we talk about right now, and that we're providing the research and the knowledge from, right? And actually supporting right now, where these herbalists getting basically killed because they believe that, so they can make a potion, right? Well, let's talk about what witches do. And you think about it and you put it nowadays, we're doing this in labs, right? So, it's really unique, and that put so much into perspective for me, because it's just kind of like, I don't want to put it towards a racism thing, but it's kind of right there. It was a group of women or a belief against somebody that we outlawed and banned for years and took lives for, right? And then it became a really quiet community. And if you were considered, a witch at first, and then you're a hippie, and then now the whole herbalist community is kind of coming back, and people are going, oh wow, this, like, it's kind of like what you guys said. It's like we realize we have this endocannabinoid systems. We realize the energy between plants, right? You do a lot of plant research, right, Kevin? So not only just cannabis, but one of the things we love to talk about is the energies of how plants can talk to each other and those beneficials that these things have. Can we talk about that harmony for a minute? And then we're going to go to a greener segment really quick. So
absolutely. So one of the things to keep in mind, the very first study just came out suggesting that plants show intelligence, which I found fascinating. It was basically a vine that would grow in a particular way. And the way it would seek out something to grow up definitely suggested that there was some sort of intelligence to what it was planned out. In other words, they mapped it. So that in itself was fascinating. But the plants do communicate. And one of the ways they do it, by the way, and you probably know this, is with terpenes. So terpenes carry that message from plant to plant to say, hey, this herbivore over here is going to eat you. So prep up here. Start releasing your allelochemicals, these defensive compounds that plants release to protect themselves. So there is a lot of plant communication that goes on. And when you release certain terpenes into the air, you'll find that they will upregulate particular compounds. So a lot of the compounds that people are interested in terms of health effects are these protective compounds that are upregulated when there is a problem in the environment, such as a drought or such as some sort of issue on exposures to air or rain or lack of light. So or bugs, fungal infections or bacterial infections. So all of these things tend to make plants talk to each other, and at the same time, as a group, upregulate particular compounds that then can be useful medicinally for humans. And I think we tend to not think about that. We tend to grow plants in isolation a lot of the time, especially in the lab. You know, we tend to do cell culture with them, which I've done a ton of cell culture with human cells, not much with plant cells, but, you know, it's pretty sterile. Well, it's got to be sterile, exactly sterile to be successful. But how realistic is that to what's actually happening in nature? And therefore, since it's not realistic we're not really mimicking what nature is doing, what does our data tell us? There's a huge piece missing in what people actually use and what they do in the world versus what comes out of the laboratory. And I think that's a really important piece here as well.
Well, actually, that's exactly where I wanted to go with this, and why I brought it up was the, you know, when we talk about even growing cannabis for medical purposes, right? There's a big difference between labs, dispensaries, indoor grows, outdoor grows. All that being said, how do we keep that consistency, and what level do we need to set? I mean, are we not talking about this enough in our industry to have a point? Because I mean, I see that there's, you know, clean kind of companies. You know, we've seen some, you know, wash in, wash out kind of facilities, but then I've also seen some facilities that I probably wouldn't want to get any flower from. And I hate to say that, but then also, you know, with that question being asked, and I want to ask one more question because I think it all kind of curtails to it. Within our industry, we see a lot of, you know, either testing labs and dispensaries, obviously processing product that should not be consumed by a patient or even by anybody technically, right, with moldy products and things of that nature, knowing that there, you know, these are issues that we have to deal with in our industry. You know, we talked to Thomas about it. You know, we try to provide a lot of tips and information on how to prevent these things from happening, and when to tell and how to tell when your weed's moldy, because again, a lot of people don't even know or look, right, because, you know, the market just buys and consumes and buys and consumes, and they're just packing a pipe. But we've seen people have issues with this, right? How do you feel about that, especially with the lab issues, right? Testing and then the dispensary levels of quality?
Well, look, if you're going to have a product for the masses, you're going to have to do laboratory studies. We're just past the point of not doing that in our evolution as a culture, as a society, as a people. However, as you know, some of the labs made money by dry labbing it. They were making shit up, writing it down on a C of A and sending it out to people. And then there were people that, you know, just checked for a few pesticides, and the growers would figure out which pesticides they were, and therefore they would use other pesticides, right? So do we want clean? Absolutely. Do we want it indoor or outdoor? That in itself is another huge issue, in my opinion. I'd love to see what Thomas has to say about this as well. But look, indoor, the regulators like that because it's protected and it's safe and it can't be stolen, right? And they can track it easier. But ecologically, the environmental footprint of that is devastating. Why would you do that when we've got sunshine? Well, it depends on where you are, right? If you're growing, but when you've got sunshine, you know, some of the states I've been in, you know, 360 days a year is sun. Like, why would you not grow something in that environment? Right. So I think there's a lot of huge issues here that we do need regulation. In my opinion, we do need regulation on the small scale. For example, when I was practicing clinical herbal medicine, did I need all of that? Well, number one, if I had a tincture that was maybe too strong and it gave people diarrhea or whatever happened, which I never did, but if I did, my population base was so small compared to what we do with products where it reaches hundreds of thousands of people. You know, you really do have to have some sort of regulatory environment to make people know, let people know that it's safe. Number one, look, there's so many people that are already scared of cannabis. So you get older people that, well, yeah, I think this could help me, but I'm afraid, right? So to have those people feel more secure and have the market be more professional, there's got to be a regulatory environment.
Oh, completely 100%. I completely 100. This is all the stuff we preach for the last 2 years right now, where people just kind of get mad at us because I one of the biggest things I try to remind people, and this is a good thing, I think, you know what I mean, with legality will come regulations or decriminalization or however we're going to do this. We need to move it off the schedule if you have my opinion on it, right? I know we talk about legalities and things like that, but we need to deschedule this product, right? Because then once descheduling happens and legalities don't matter, right? We fall under already preconceived legal things, and then it makes it a commodity at that point to me, right? It just makes it an agricultural commodity, and that's where we really want to see it end up. And then we can get to having all these levels of where you need to be in a range of being a medical, laboratory, whether you're a grow facility or you're a laboratory, or you have these restrictions and these rules around it. And then also you have people that are going to enforce it. Some states we've seen enforcements on dispensaries be amazing, where they grow a good product or bad product, they have a recall, right? Here in Vermont, we've seen dispensaries get away with stuff like that, which is scary to me, because with our systems here, it's unilateral, so it's just it's to me it's just a system that doesn't make sense, right? Because it's there's no options, there's no choice. If you have a bad issue, if you have an issue, you're almost forced to do that, because you're by our state laws have to stay in compliance with the numbers by the patients that you get to grow for, right? So Thomas, I know I was hoping you're glad you're back. I don't know if you froze on me or not, but I didn't know
you left.
Kevin,
you disappeared. It made me the host for 2 minutes. You disappeared. You went, wow, where'd you go?
I don't know what happened. I'm watching my internet. It's the world we live in right now, I believe, right? But
it's all right. I got notes. I got like 2 minutes of stuff to talk about right now, including stuff that happened 10 minutes ago. I wait my turn. Okay, so I want to start with what Kevin was talking about, indoor versus outdoor. This is a fantastic topic. So first and foremost, yes, it is easier to control a plant. It is easier to make the plant not be as persistent to having mold or pests by growing it indoors. However, you are destroying the environment in the process, and you're not allowing the plant to reach its entire potential. There's no way in heck that there's any grow light on the market right now that anyone can feasibly purchase, even a commercial grower, that's going to properly match what they can do outside under the sun.
I agree.
With that said, if you're in Vermont and you're like, dude, I don't have that many months of growing season outdoors, that's fine. Greenhouse options work fantastic. You can even dig down into the dirt 3 or 4 feet, or even further, get below the frost line and have a much warmer greenhouse to work with. Start your grow a little bit earlier, make it last a little bit later. If you have to, put a little bit of heat in there and run some light deprivation. You can get 4 grows per season outdoors without a problem. More if you're actually skilled at it, as long as you know what you're doing. So in that respect, my opinion is always to go with whatever's environmentally conscious first and take care of the other issues using preventative maintenance. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and spray pesticides or anything like that on your crops, but I am telling you that proper maintenance and proper selection of the correct cultivars, you can grow anything without having to worry too much about those issues. And as far as the pests are concerned, as Kevin had mentioned, terpenes of the plants and stuff, there are other plants out there that can commingle with your plants in your garden, in your hemp field, wherever they may be, that are going to help deter those pests and prevent you from having to use any of those pesticides. And you're still going to be able to provide a good, clean outdoor product. Now, with that said, Joe, you had also touched base on indica and sativa. And I'm glad you had brought that up, because that one is huge for me. I hate when people come to me and say, Tom, I need something that's indica for sleeping. Actually, my segment today is on CBN. It's not a very scientific segment. It really just goes into a rudimentary way of turning THC into CBN via overcooking it in your oven. Now, when you do that, it is going to provide you CBN, but it's also going to cook out most of the other cannabinoids and beneficials from that. So what I actually do is we'll turn that into edibles, and I'll actually take whatever plant I started with and I'll separate it into 3 batches. One batch will remain raw. That's my THCA, my CBDA, CBGA, etc. That's my raw batch. And then I have a properly decarbed batch where I cook at about 240 degrees for about a half an hour, give or take, depending on how much I'm putting in there and the size of the oven. And then the third batch, I overcook it entirely at over 300 degrees for well over an hour. And then I combine them all together to make the edibles or to make the tinctures. That way, when I have the final product that I'm having at the end, it's a powerful medicinal product. And I don't have to worry about having too much THC to make me paranoid or anything. And all of the other cannabinoids and terpenes coexist and provide that nice entourage and pyramid or umbrella effect, which is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I want to bring up a point that I was going to bring up earlier. Thank you for that. I completely agree with you. You made a statement. If you know what you're doing, I think I think that is a problem a lot of the time. But I wanted to make this point about dose, and Ethan Russo, who has become a bit of a mentor to me and is really a great guy. I just one of my last issues of the Spelman Report was an interview with him. But one of the things he says is if you are using medical cannabis and you are high, you
Oh
Oh,
no, we lost him. All right, hopefully it gets back in here real quick. Dr. Ethan
I hear
Russo.
that too. I was like, oh no.
My God, I was so ready to hear that. So Dr. Ethan Russo, if you guys don't know who Dr. Ethan Russo is, amazing gentleman. He's the big guy who's been really pushing the
Entourage.
Thank you. I almost went blank there for a minute because I'm trying to make sure that my screen's on for if we can get Kevin back on here. So Dr. Ethan Russo talks about the entourage effect a lot, right? So he's the guy that kind of spearheaded that whole vision of that, right? I don't know how the best way to explain it, but
I can bottom line it for you, Joe, if you want. I'll bottom line it. It's really easy. The whole of the plant is greater than its individual parts.
Yes. That's the best way to put it. That's a great way to put it, right? Because it really is. I mean, when you talk about, because this is what I talk about with the CBD industry right now, to me, it's just a bubble, right? Because everybody's talking about CBD, it's a marketing thing. Like to me, it's almost a gimmick to help support legalization, and I'll take it, whatever works, right? But as we all sit here, we all talk about this, we all go, but we need more, right? We need more than just CBD. We need more than just, THC even at that point. Even when we talk about like RSOs and tinctures and things like that, Thomas will talk to us. It's a blend of things that have multiple different personalities and things of that nature. So when we can utilize it, it's a different experience. This is what I talk about with the experiences and the feeling that you get, because some people, like Thomas said, are looking for that kick in the head. And it's not what you expect to get, like a fresh pressed dab and have the entourage effect. That's why we as educators, I think, need to explain to people when they take a certain product, what they're going to feel from that product, whether it's on a high, medium, or low, because sometimes we don't know, right? If they're going to take a commercialized product that has been mass produced or even small mass produced locally, then there's a risk that we can't explain to them unless we're trying that same exact batch and we experience that feeling. And then even then, like every other medication that's out there, we all have a different feeling from that, right? Sherry, I see you itching at this one.
Raising my hand. Yeah, so the real quick question too about like when we're educating patients on the type of experience they're going to have, one of the things that we always educate patients on as well is everything that you're doing or not doing in your life is going to affect how that plant works in your body, right? So you can't, so I could use a particular cultivar and a method of administration, and depending upon what I eat, how my sleep level is, what my stress level is, what's going on in my life, all of that stuff, I can have a different effect. So I've found within our patients is that when we are working with them and teaching them how to use the plant and how to craft an experience based on their goals of health and wellness, they have to pay attention to more than just the cannabis. It's one piece of the pie, because the endocannabinoid system is affected by health and wellness activities. It's only one of two things. Your activities of daily living and the choices that you make are either supporting your endocannabinoid system or they're not. And that's what we're seeing with health and wellness. And that's what we're seeing when we're consulting with patients. And especially when it comes to educating on using multiple different modalities and combinations, different cultivars, and, different extraction methods. So that's my thing on it.
I'm glad you brought that up, Sherry, because in my experience, when it comes to it, a lot of doctors are just really adamant on just, here's another pill to take care of your symptoms, go on your way. And really, it's masking the problem. It's not really taking care of the problem. When if they actually were to sit down and say, hey, how is your diet? You know, what's your exercise regimen like? You know, are you sleeping in a humid house? Does it smell like mold? You know, there's so many other things that could be going on in your life that could help solve the problem other than feeding some sort of pharmaceutical to it. Now, not to say that a pharmaceutical isn't going to be the answer, but just that, you know, it's important to get to the root of the problem. And a lot of the times the root of the problem is the overall health and well-being of the person and their stress levels and what they're doing at home, how much time they're spending in the sun, etc. And I think another huge problem that this leads into is the misinformation in the medical cannabis market. I was recently in Maine and I went to the medical facility and I'm oh, what do you have for options for me? I'm looking for a concentrate that's going to help me relax. And so they're like, oh, you need this indica peanut breath. Oh, okay, sure, why not? And I get it. And the first thing I notice is that it's white and cream colored and crystallized like sugar. Like, okay, there's no way in heck that this is going to do anything but send me up. I'm not going down into the couch with this one. No way. There's no way that this has any indica type feel to it, as you would say. And I think that in lies another huge problem. There's a huge difference between a recreational product that people are using to get high and a product that's going to provide the medicine. And when it, going back to my segment that I'm going to have today is the CBN. You know, with indica and sativa plants, as they say, it has nothing to do with how the plant actually makes you feel. It's where the plant was grown, where the plant originated from. So in that respect, you can have a sativa plant that gives you the same couch lock and relaxation effects as an otherwise, you know, really heavy kush plant or something along those lines, as long as Joe had mentioned earlier, the harvest time. So you harvest a plant early before the trichomes are at maturity, you're going to have a clearer, cleaner looking, more honey-like colored oil. You harvest past the point of maturity with the amber trichomes, you end up with a much more darker colored oil, but you also end up with a lot more of that CBN and the relaxation because the THC and the other cannabinoids have started to degrade at that point. So I think, especially in the medical community, in addition to having health and wellness be a huge part of it and just trying to monitor how people are doing on a daily basis, they really need to look at the products that they're actually consuming for their medication, because just because they say, yeah, this is, you know, 20% THC and 5% CBD and so much CBG, whatever, doesn't necessarily mean that it has everything in it that's going to help you and do everything that you need to heal whatever it is you're trying to heal.
Well, I was going to say we lost Kevin there for a minute, but we're just going to talk about, we kind of went on a little Ethan Russo tangent there because I'm glad you brought his name up because everybody talks about the entourage effect. We're big fans of the entourage effect of pushing that, and that's why we talked about the distillate and the isolates and all those things, because as we know, you can't have an entourage effect if you're taking CBD isolate. You can't have an entourage effect if you're taking a blended distillate, right? Just the processes alone just won't allow that to happen at all, right? And like for me, I talk to patients and people that I talk to a lot about the fresh press dab, you know what I mean? The one that, you know, a week off the plant, you press it and, you know, the varying temperatures where burn off temperatures are different cannabinoids because, you know, we can start burning off cannabinoids. The idea for patient, right, is we're trying to keep them. When I was in your class, one of the big things you brought up was the water extraction and how that pretty much keeps a lot of the cannabinoids when we do certain extractions, or even how much we lose just in curing, right? We talk about that a lot. So even from cut to cure, we're going to lose a lot of that plant just through, you know, degradation, moisture drying off. You know, you're drying the plant out, so it's obviously its values are going to change. But I want to get back to you, let you talk about Ethan Russo really quick, and then we're going to break to do the Green Nurse segment here really quick. I can't wait to do Thomas's segment, and I got a lot to talk to Timothy about. So we're going to be taking a break here, guys, soon. But I want to talk to Kevin and hear your answer to all that, and then your explanation on the entourage effect.
Yeah, well, thanks. And sorry I disappeared. I forgot to plug in when I moved my computer into my office. Let me finish the Ethan Russo thought here. So in other words, what he's saying is that what he said was, if you're getting high from your medical cannabis, you're having an adverse event. In other words, what he's saying is that you don't need a dose that gets you high for most problems. Now, there are some issues you will. I mean, severe pain, yeah, you're going to be high. A lot of the cancer treatments that are not attenuating chemotherapy effects or side effects, but actual treating cancer, yeah, you're going to probably need to be high. I've seen, people use up to 1 gram a day of THC CBD mixtures to treat cancer. So that's what I think it's really important for us to keep in mind. And I think most people don't understand that. Is like getting high is fine. That's a whole nother recreational piece. But if you're actually having a job and you're trying to treat medium levels of pain or anxiety or, whatever sleep issues at night, being high at work for me, in terms of the technical stuff I do, isn't an option. I can't function that way when I'm high. So I think that's important for people to realize. I think most people don't realize you don't necessarily need to be high to treat most of the conditions we're talking about. And in fact, very low doses. If you look at Dr. Dustin Sulak's, another good friend, who his paper on artisanal cannabis preparations, he's got some great information on dosing in there that I think is worth looking at. Now let's see, what was the other thing you just asked me? Oh, entourage. So look, here's the thing. The entourage effect, or synergy, as I like to call it, is not the exception to cannabis. That's the rule in general for medicinal plants. And that's what we need to understand about medicinal plants. It's not about the rationale to isolate one compound and call that the effective dose doesn't really hold a lot of water. If you really look at the arguments around it, it's really about control of dose and not necessarily efficacy. And as we're starting to see, we're seeing, for example, with some of the tuberculosis cases, especially inner city that you see now, they're using cocktails. If you're treating a lot of different cancers, they're using cocktails. If even now with blood pressure, they're using cocktails. And so what are we saying here? What we're doing is recreating complex phytochemical matrices. In other words, plants, right? We're recreating the complexity, the chemical complexity of plants. And this is what was the original medicine for people. This is what our genomes, our cells know, is this chemical complexity. Look, 30% of all plants are food, 30% of all medicinal plants are considered food plants. So in other words, we've been doing this ever since we've been eating plants, which goes back at least 2.5 to 5 million years. And if you trace it back to mammals, we're talking 88 million years. So this is what we've been doing. This is what our genomes know. This is what our system knows, is complex arrays of plant compounds going through our body, strumming our genome, if you will. A little Roberta Flack reference there. This is what's normal. And isolates, I would challenge you to think about it in terms of a planetary perspective. If you dumped a bunch of one chemical in one spot, what do you call that? You call it pollution.
Yeah.
Right? And that's essentially what we're doing in the body. Now, I'm not saying pharmaceuticals don't work. They do work. They've saved lives. But we have over 100,000 deaths from properly prescribed pharmaceuticals every year.
Yep.
What does that tell us? That we could be using something safer and maybe with the same efficacy as isolated chemicals. There's a whole model now that derives from systems biology where they really started looking at ecosystems and understanding that you can't just pull one species out, it changes everything, right? Or you can't just put a bunch of one species in and it not change. Well, in the same sort of way, there's this model that derived from that called network pharmacology. And network pharmacology is all about the entourage effect. It's now scientific, if you will. And so that's what I think we really need to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And when we talk about all this energy you need, just even with your diet, like you said, all these different things that we can eat, not even just cannabis based, you know what I mean? Like when we want to talk about being healthy, it's not about just smoking a joint and it's going to make us healthy, right? We're not going to lose weight. We're going to sit on the couch and smoke joints, right? There's a lot more to it, but it's mental health, right? Which you talk a lot about, is a huge part of it. Stress levels, you know what I mean? Which, and then diets
Absolutely.
obviously are huge. And these are things I've learned years ago. It's like, you know, if you're going to eat McDonald's 4 times a day, you're probably gonna be sicker than most people, all right? And I'm sure there's a lot of statistics and tests that can support that, right? Now, for whatever reason, we don't need to go into, but in a general speaking, you know, narrative, then you're gonna be a little bit more unhealthy, right? So, you know, the entourage effect to me is amazing because you know, when we have a fresh press dab, you can tell the high is just, it's a totally different experience, right? Now we were talking about processing and things like that. We had a listener want to get your opinion on Delta 8. How does Delta 8 fit in on all this?
Well, Delta 8 it does occur naturally. It is more stable than Delta 9, interestingly. And you're going to get, now I have to, this goes with me saying I've never actually done Delta 8. So this is my scientific opinion and not my experiential opinion. My understanding is you're going to get a very similar feel, if not the same feel, but that may not be true for people who use a lot of Delta 8.
I can share my experience with it. I've done Delta 8 in a vape and I've done it in a gummy. And the way I can explain it is that I didn't feel the impairment that I have with THC. I could explain it as I felt a little bit more floaty. That's the best way I can explain it. I felt a little bit more chill, felt a little bit more, I wasn't impaired. It was definitely more of like an anti-anxiety. That's how I felt from my own experience.
I had a much more mild, psychoactive effect.
Yeah, I did not have a psychoactive effect with
very
it.
minor, very minor.
Interesting.
Now, as far as like scheduling though, and then how that relates to cannabis from a scientific level, because we talk about laws and, you know, right now, obviously, Delta 8
incredibly interesting legal question, both CBN, CBG, and Delta 8, and that is synthetic versus natural cannabinoid. And what defines a synthetic cannabinoid is the process of converting CBD into Delta 9, a synthetic process, or not, because that's huge into what the most recent TEA guidance was in terms of cannabinoids. You know, they go after synthetic cannabinoids like the spice and the K2 and these that have nothing to do with cannabinoids, cannabis at all, but they lump them together. And the DEA's position is that the process by which you create or break, you know, and I'm not a scientist, so I'm sure a lot of people in this panel could probably talk to it clearer than I can, but the process by which you convert that either CBD into Delta 8 or THC or any of the conversions creates a synthetic cannabinoid, even though that synthetic cannabinoid occurs naturally. And it's like a fascinating legal question. It's the big issue about, we go back and forth whether Delta 8 is legal or not.
Interesting.
I mean, that's the question, right? And everybody wants to know, like, what is it? How's it rate? What is it classified next to? Is it a cannabinoid? Is it, you know, how, you know?
Like everybody's talking here, it's one piece of the puzzle. This is not about any individual cannabinoids. What drives me crazy with CBD, CBD is a modulating chemical. CBD it's not even an active chemical itself. It modulates other cannabinoids. You know, these all fit together like a puzzle. And when you separate out one, sure, you get a little bit of an effect. But it's not, I mean, you're just missing everything, you know? And when we can start really fully understanding cannabinoid profiles and how individual cannabinoid profiles and terpenes together mix and affect our endocannabinoid system specifically, I mean, this is like fascinating to me. I feel like we're like at the tip of this iceberg of fully understanding not only cannabinoid medicine, but specific ailments, cannabinoid profiles for specific, you know, targeted. And it's just, it blows my mind. I love it.
Let's take that. That's brilliant, Timothy. Let's take it one step further. Not only is it cannabinoid profiles affecting specific ailments, but it's cannabinoid profiles affecting specific people with specific elements, because you've got SNPs, right? Single nucleotide polymorphisms. In other words, a fancy way of saying there's slight changes in DNA in many of us, in all of our genes, but potentially the endocannabinoid system as well, the genes that regulate that. And therefore, they're going to act ever slightly so different than what would be considered the normal type. In my book, normal is a setting on a dryer, but you know, the idea that there's somebody who doesn't have the mutation, right? And so therefore, for example, the FA SNPs that we're seeing, fatty acid amide hydrolase, We're seeing certain types of SNPs where in FA where people really don't like cannabis because they're already there, right? We're seeing SNPs in FA where people don't have a normal response to pain because they break down anandamide so slowly that they really don't, they have a decreased pain response. They're analgesic all the time, in other words. We're seeing FOS SNPs where people get super anxiety because they break down anandamide really quickly. So this is not just with FOS, it's with MAGL, it's with all these different enzymes in our systems and even receptors. And so that's going to really affect not only the ailment, but also the person and the way they respond to it, right? And so there's going to be stuff where one person might think, oh my God, this is the bomb in terms of this cultivar, and other people are going to go, this really sucks.
I preach that every day. When you go into a dispensary, don't look at the THC level. Don't look at how pretty the bag appeal is. Ask them if you can smell the bud. Ask them if you can hold the jar, open it up, and take a nice big inhale of the terpenes and just see which one smells right to your body, because one of them is going to say, dude, that's the one, get that one. And that's the one that your body's actually going to want. And your friend that's with you may want something entirely different.
Exactly.
I had a question for both Tim and Kevin. Tim in a legal aspect and Kevin from a scientific aspect. Tim had mentioned converting CBD into THC. So as far as isomerization is concerned, I've toyed a little bit with converting CBD into THC. And my question for Tim is, from a legal standpoint, would that be considered manufacture of a controlled substance? And for Kevin, my question is, scientifically, does THC that's been created through isomerization of CBD still provide the same therapeutic effects that you would otherwise expect from traditional THC?
Tim, you want to go first?
I'll go first. Sure. Would that be a legal production of it? Again, this comes down to the conflict we're seeing right now. First of all, source rule. Was the CBD you used to convert extracted from hemp, or was it extracted from cannabis containing greater than 0.3% delta-9 THC under the federal standard established in the Farm Bill? Source rule applies. According to the strict black letter of the law, following the 2018 Agricultural Improvement Act or the Farm Bill, cannabis sativa containing less than 0.3% delta-9 THC is considered hemp. All other extracts, derivatives, salts, isomers, blah, 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 down the line, all legal. Over 0.3% delta-9 THC, the most arbitrary number in the world, illegal, felony. So source rule applies, right? So you extract that CBD from that hemp containing less than, and then convert that. Well, it came from hemp, so it should be legal, which is the same argument about delta-9. But then you get the DEA's position. Well, no. If you convert it, if you conduct a chemical process, regardless of what that chemical process is, you have now created a synthetic cannabinoid. That is no longer a cannabinoid extracted. You have created a new cannabinoid, you've created a synthetic cannabinoid, and that in fact is a controlled substance. But they also say that the THC extracted from hemp, which contains less than 0.3% THC, but 0.2 is still some THC, theoretically under the, you extract that, that's legal THC because it's been extracted from hemp. Of course, the DA, no, legislative intent. The legislature never intended for that to be. So, these questions have not been resolved by courts yet. And they provide great water cooler chat for cannabis lawyers. We scream at each other about who's right.
I love that answer, because I think about it and I go, well, you look at the intent, and if you really read what it says, technically, I guess my CBD oil could have 20% THC in it as long as it came from a hemp cultivar that originally came out as under 0.3% THC. But again, you've reached that point of intent, and I can't imagine even the state would be willing to let that one slide.
Yeah, I mean, this is federal law too, because under the Agricultural Improvement Act, so you still have state law to deal with. Remember, in all these cases, you always got to be looking at both ends of the spectrum there.
So is CBD, THC derived from CBD the same effect? Theoretically, it should be, but it's going to depend on how exactly what reagents were used, because you could actually slightly alter during that chemical reaction from CBD to THC. There could be other slight alterations. So as long as there are none, it should be the same.
Fantastic.
It's amazing. Science is amazing when we get down to it, but the legalities of it, because you think like once you even like, you would think by law once you decarboxylate, you're changing the scientific nature of that product again, right? So like if you decarboxylate to put into something,
Filtration
that
could
would be
theoretically
legal?
under the DEA interpretation be considered a synthetic process. I mean, how far are you going to take it? You really have to stop the absurdity. We're really hoping that within the new administration now, we're going to see, and we're obviously going to see a new attorney general. From what I hear, America Garland finally is off the bench and in play.
That after
The new head of the DEA, hopefully new USDA, new FDA. So we're going to see kind of a new priorities and some new prerogatives. What I'm hoping is that we see an expansion of the scientific research. The DEA actually does issue permits for research now, that their federal funding is available for research now, and that we can actually start moving forward with a full understanding and get away from all the anecdotal stories that millions of people seem to have. But carry no weight.
Right now, we talk about decarboxylation. I hate to split the conversation because this is such an amazing conversation. My brain hurts from learning so much. I love all you guys. This is amazing. This is a great show, guys. And again, if you guys want to catch any of our archives of our shows, all of our YouTube pages and our social media pages has access to those. We're going to go to the Green Nurse real quick because they have a segment. I don't want to go too far over time. I know we're going to, and we all got stuff I know that people like to do, because Thomas has a great segment, and I really got to talk to Tim, and the conversation with Kevin is great because these are legal issues I want to talk to you about. Like, where's that line draw? What is considered synthetic? Is a CO2? Is a water? Is that change of process? Is that any of those processes all considered under DEA law illegal, right? And then we have the whole extraction issue going on right now with the CO2 extraction lawsuit right now with Cureleaf, right? Where is this going to go? Or with GW Pharma, right? We're going to talk to Tim about again a little bit later because there's a lot of cool, interesting questions being raised out there in the media world. But I want to get to the Green Nurse. I want to get to their segment today. They had a great segment on a quick thing about decarboxylation, and what's really important to a lot of us that we're not talking about enough is vitamin B12, right? Oh, you guys still there? Oh, you're on mute there, Sherry.
All
Hey,
right,
hey.
I'm unmuted. Hello.
Yeah, folic acid, B12.
Yes. Well, so what we're doing on the Green Nurse platform is we're talking about health awareness months. So, every month there's health awareness. And the big thing that's really important to us is all those different health awareness topics can be linked to the endocannabinoid system. So really, really interesting. So talking about folic acid, B vitamins, what it does in the body. When you have a deficiency of it, what does it manifest? And how can that affect our endocannabinoid system? And why, why we need to think about other nutritional components when we are working with patients, teaching and educating on how to support and nourish the endocannabinoid system. So hopefully.
It's a packed segment, guys. You're going to learn a lot, so stay tuned. And here it is, Can Talk with the Green Nurses.
Happy Hump Day. Welcome.
Happy Hump Day, right?
Yeah.
Everyone take a nice big deep breath in. Woo.
There we go.
Breathing, circulation.
Yes. Okay, so welcome. It's January 13th, 2021. And here we are. Here we are.
Another day. Decarboxylate.
Yes.
It's a really cool word.
It is. It's a chemical process, physical chemical process, right?
Yep.
You apply heat to the cannabis plant and it decarboxylates, chemically changes the acidic forms of THC and CBD and the other cannabinoids. And what do you get, Sherry?
You transform the inactive acid part of the cannabinoids like THCA and CBDA into the active THC and CBD. So the reason why people like to decarboxylate, they get a higher potency in their products that are consumed, like edibles, gummies, tincture,
capsules.
I mean, if you eat a raw cannabis plant, you're not going to feel any intoxicating effects. Like you're not going to feel the pain relieving effects of, say, THC, because it's in its inactive form. Now, THCA is a powerful cannabinoid used in medicine, right?
Yep.
Because it's really good anti-inflammatory. So, you know, both of those things are very powerful, but, you know, well, that's why people smoke it, right? Because when they smoke cannabis and they get high, they get intoxicating feeling. It's because it decarboxylates that THCA.
Yeah.
Then you get the good stuff. So what are we going to talk about? Folic acid today?
Yeah, so today is Wellness Wednesday, wise wisdom for wellness, health awareness themes. So what we've been doing throughout the year and what we're going to continue to do is we're going to talk about the different monthly health awareness themes. So last week we talked about National Birth Defect Prevention Month, which is going on in January, and we talked a little bit about that. But this week we're going to talk about National Folic Acid Awareness Month, which is really interesting, you know, and it's like folic acid, B vitamins, you know, how does that have to do with anything? Well, it does, believe it or not. Phytobotanical nutrients, nutrition, micronutrients are all really, really important for our endocannabinoid system, health and signaling. Really, really important. So Mark, what's folic acid?
So folic acid is essential B vitamin that's necessary for proper cell growth. And B vitamins bathe the central nervous system. So you need to have B vitamins. And listen, folate versus folic acid, right? Folate occurs naturally in certain foods. There's whole grains, dark leafy green vegetables, which I love, broccoli, asparagus, Brussels sprouts. I'm getting hungry. Beets, citrus fruits, avocado, papaya, bananas, eggs. My God, I got to go make breakfast. Folic acid is a man-made it's a man-made supplement used in fortified foods like rice, pasta, bread, some breakfast cereals. You'll see it's fortified on the side. That's what it means as folic acid in it. And it's added into foods. The body absorbs more folic acid from supplements and fortified foods than in natural foods.
Yeah, and truly the part that's important about that when we talk about nutrition and health and wellness, is that, you know, we are truly a country that is overfed and undernourished. We are missing so many micronutrients in our diets. So it's really important that we bring up these different things. And the reason why folic acid is so important is because of all the different things that it does do.
Right.
Especially for people that are, you know, thinking of becoming pregnant and having babies. You know, folic acid is huge in the development of the brain and spine.
Right.
So folic acid deficiency can cause birth defects of the brain and spine. And there's little different things, you know, folic acid can prevent up to 70% of these different types of conditions. So spina bifida, incomplete development of the brain, the spinal cord, right? It's the protective covering around the brain. You know, folic acid deficiency can cause part of the brain to be missing. Really interesting. And premature or low birth weight babies. So really, really important folic acid, B vitamins, and, you know, being able to supplement not only, you know, eating those foods that are rich in those types of in folic acid, but also supplementing if we need to. So why do we talk about this? Because of the endocannabinoid system. We have that, my umbrella right up there.
That umbrella.
All the time. And the spokes of the umbrella are different organ systems in our immune system. And the fabric pieces of the umbrella that connect to the umbrella are the neurotransmitter signaling systems that give messages. Very tippy top of the umbrella is the endocannabinoid system that blankets on top of our umbrella that give messages to keep our umbrella going up and down nicely. So if we're not making enough of our own internal endogenous cannabinoids, if we're not making enough of our own anandamine and 2-AG, guess what? Our umbrella isn't going to look so good. So
it's not going to open and close well.
Yeah.
So.
Healthy food choices, nutrients, micronutrients, including B vitamins, affect the health of our endocannabinoid system. Right? So everything that we're doing or not doing in our lives affects it. So here we go. Let's get into a little bit more about some of the symptoms of folate or B12 deficiency.
Okay?
Yeah, there's quite a few.
There are. Fatigue, tiredness, exhaustion, lack of energy.
Paresthesias, pins and needles, right?
Yeah, sore red tongue, mouth ulcers.
muscle weakness,
disturbed vision,
psychological problems, which may include depression or anxiety,
cognitive deficits, problems with memory, understanding, and judgment.
temporary infertility. That's interesting.
Right. Pregnancy complications. And again, birth defects that we talked about a little earlier.
Yeah.
Mm.
Heart conditions. You know, B
Yeah.
vitamins are essential to healthy cardiac function. So what can cause some of these B12 or folate deficiencies?
Well, I recognize the first one, Sherry. My grandmother, God bless her, she had pernicious anemia. And that's from when the immune system attacks healthy cells in your stomach and it prevents your body from absorbing B12 from the food you eat.
Yeah. So well, here's another good one, right? So what is it when we talk about endocannabinoid system health and nourishment? Diet is huge. So dietary efficiency, right? Food, fast food, fried food, fake food, poor diets, alcohol, sugar, all of that stuff can deplete our body of B vitamins. B vitamins are essential. They bathe our central nervous system.
They do. They do. Medications, some anticonvulsants, proton pump inhibitors can cause a drug nutrient depletion, and they can affect how much of the vitamins your body absorbs.
Yep. Other thing too, we're no surprise, stress.
Yeah.
Stress can affect our B vitamins, unhealthy gut microbiome. So if we have a stomach and we're not eating properly, dietary deficiencies due to our lifestyle, that can cause the vitamin B12 or folate.
Yeah. And the next one, Sherry, tell us about this one.
Okay, this is very, very interesting.
Is that an acronym for mother? No, go ahead.
I know, MTHFR. Okay, it's this big, long-winded, giant word.
Yeah.
I can't even pronounce it, but it looks like motherfucker. Really.
It does, and it is a motherfucker. So 30 to 60% of people have this genetic mutation, and it's where the B vitamins don't cross the blood-brain barrier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the interesting thing too is if people have these MTHFR and they don't have, you know, B vitamins don't cross the blood-brain barrier, it can manifest in some of these other symptoms that we have mentioned about folate deficiency, B12 deficiency.
Yeah.
So what these people have to do is they have to take an activated form of folic acid. So there are supplements that are out there. It's called methylfolate. So the MTHFR converts the folic acid to methylfolate so it can actually cross into the brain. So a lot of people that have that gene, it's not able to cross over. And so what happens is they manifest these symptoms that mimic the B12 deficiency, vitamin folic acid deficiency. So this specific type of supplement allows that B vitamin to get into the brain. So good stuff. So as we all know, we are here to educate you and empower you to make choices that are important for you. Healthy choices, nutrients, micronutrients, including B vitamins. We want you to remember B vitamins for the win.
Yes, yes. And of course, decarboxylated cannabis.
Decarboxylated cannabis, absolutely. And if you or someone you love is suffering from chronic illness, chronic pain, if you or someone you love is interested in learning how to incorporate plant wisdom and nutritional components of the plant, or to have a canna healthy lifestyle, or if you or someone you love is cannabis curious and you want to learn how to have a safe adult use experience, reach out to us at The Green Nurse. We're here to help you. www.thegreennurse.com.
And you know,
Are you there, Joe?
I am here. Did that work? Did you guys see it?
Yep.
Yeah, it was good.
I always have to ask because we never know on these platforms, right? We always have some fun issues. Now that was a segment loaded with so much information, so many questions, and one of the big things for me, and I want to come out of this right before we get to Timothy, because there's so much I want to talk to Timothy about that I think we're all going to have a lot of questions and responses to. But for me, like I said, I was a chef for a long time, so. And this is a generalized question I want to ask everybody because we have, Mark's here, Sherry's here, and we have Kevin here, right? So within our research and in our time, and, obviously Thomas and Timothy, I'm sure can share experience on this, but for me being a chef, I remember, when I first became a chef and I became really interested in the farm to table aspect and the actual, to a level where what we're eating is very important to us, where we're getting it from, where we're sourcing it from, all, right down to all these little details that we even look at the cannabis market and do the same thing in, right? Know your grower, know your farmer kind of a thing, right? Local food, local meats, local cheeses, local things, and support your industry, right? Now for me, I saw, this was probably a good 20 plus years ago now, but I want to say, remember when everybody, all of a sudden gluten intolerance became a big issue, right? And then now we're starting to see all these issues and starting to see more issues, and whether it's through, drugs, pharmaceuticals, the way our medical system has approached things, or whether it's our diets, like Sherry had said. But I want to bring up this topic of processed foods, right? Like we kind of, in my opinion, as a chef, I've kind of seen the processed food trend kind of run right along that same slope of all these issues that we're starting to see and these health concerns, which now that I think one of the best things we have recently is COVID, because the lockdowns, I think, have shifted a lot of people's mentality towards what they're eating and what they're ingesting, as we've seen with, even right down to consuming alcohol and using more cannabis, right? We've seen 400% increase in, what was it, Michigan this last month or year, right? So it's amazing to see the transition in those statistics. But for me, and with everybody being here, when we talk about diets and what we've seen in the last 20 years, is there a relatable impact with that, where, we're not consuming so many home cooked meals anymore? We're not grabbing food fresh from the garden or fresh from the store because a lot of us, let's be honest, we don't have time, right? So it's unfortunately, convenience has put the pressure on us, which is stress from work, which is so many other issues that the green nurses talk about every day. So I know it's this big round and round circle we could talk about, but this is something that I think about a lot. Am I wrong in this thought? Oh, Kevin, you're still muted, unfortunately, here, but I'd like to hear some reactions too. If how you guys feel about that. Am I missing something? Is it something different that we could put on there that I'm not thinking about? But from, just from a food level, and when I go to the stores, and now we have convenience stores, you know what I mean? Like we can run to the convenience stores and grab a bag of chips, we can grab a muffin. We're not coming home and cooking these meals utilizing everything we just talked about, right? So when we need these vitamin B12, where are we getting it? Mark, you made a great point of a lot of great foods where we can get this stuff from, but these aren't foods I'm seeing served on plates in households anymore, right?
So we need to have a drive-through with fresh juices and fresh, you know what I mean? Like, I'm serious, like fresh cannabis juice, juicing, healthy snacks, raw food. Raw food is amazing. Raw food diet, paleo, like you have all of these things. Why not? I'll go.
People will eat it. Make it more convenient and people will consume it. Make it, convenient to be healthy and people will be.
Nobody wants to take the chance though, Tim. Because a French fry is pretty cheap to cook and everybody will buy them, right?
Well, and that's the issue, right? Is that, you said it right. If you make it, they'll buy it. But the thing is, so many people don't really know how to cook anymore.
That's right, Kevin.
There was a halfway house that I used to be involved with where people were, once they made it through auricular acupuncture, a certain level of that, so they were using less opioids, they would go to this halfway house. And my thing was, hey, let's get some nutrition into these folks. And what ended up happening is somebody started volunteering to deliver a lot of vegetables. Well, guess what? They were all thrown in the trash because nobody in the house knew how to cook them. So I think that's a really huge piece here that I think you're right. I think food, look, on my book, in terms of health, attitude, what we think really does affect us. Movement, we have to move. Our bodies are designed to move. Exercise is really key. And then lastly, nutrition. If you're not eating well, you're just not going to be healthy. You don't have the building blocks to create health. There was a fascinating study done where they looked at people who were consuming number of servings of vegetables and fruits a day, right? When they got to 10, which nobody does, I mean, I don't even do that, right? When they got to 10 servings a day of fruits and vegetables, those people's depression rate just dropped off the charts. It just almost disappeared, which I found fascinating because the recommendation now is 5 fruits and servings a day, right? But even that didn't really do 10 servings did.
Yeah. Well, I just love the whole concept of nutritional psychiatry, and this the interesting fact of how our microbiome, our enteric nervous system, communicates to our central nervous system via the endocannabinoid system, and how our cognition can improve when we feed our gut healthy micronutrients. It just makes sense.
You bring up a great point.
Clean weed, right, Tom?
Exactly.
The enteric nervous system, that enteric nervous system, that area, that brain, they've called it the second brain in the gut, right? That for every 9 messages that goes up to the central nervous system, you would think that the central nervous system would send more. For every 9 messages that goes up, only 1 message goes back to the enteric nervous system.
Ooh.
So if you're brain dead and you're on life support in a hospital, your enteric nervous system is working fine, even though your brain is dead. So the enteric nervous system has this amazing impact on us, on our viscera, on our organ systems that really do affect the way we think. And that's what neuroscience is showing now, is that our enteric nervous system is actively involved in the way we cognate, the way we think about things. So think about people who are eating really crappy food all day long, every day. Does that affect the perception of the universe? Well, I think that's probably true, because we just showed you that 10 servings a day of fresh fruits and vegetables drop the depression rate almost off the scale. So we really need to think about food in a way that we haven't. And I think that slow food movement, which largely disappeared, or at least around me it did, was a really good movement, right?
Yes. And then that brings up the other concept too of Ayurvedic herbs, adaptogens, and mushrooms, fungus. Mushrooms. I am blown away by what mushrooms can do to our bodies. And I just watched the movie Fantastic Fungi. I think I watched it 4 times. And I was just
it's a great movie.
Completely blown away.
It is, I know.
How even the root systems of these mushrooms communicate. We have this, this is how I interpreted it in my own mind, was that we have an earth endocannabinoid system that is run by mushrooms underground. I was like, what a perfect analogy of having that whole mycelium of, these little organisms that are like growing all throughout underneath the ground, connecting everything, and how it truly is cyclical, and what the mushrooms do, and how, it regenerates and rebirth. I think of the phoenix. I think of the endocannabinoid system when I think of mushrooms.
There are growers that will implement mushrooms into their grows, or will retill it back into their live soils, right, Thomas? I mean, we've talked about this before.
Absolutely. I mean, when it comes down to it, the mycelium, the additional microbial growth that's provided by the mushrooms that are tilled back into the top couple of inches of soil is just fantastic for all the other microorganisms and other bennies in the soil that actually need something to feed on other than the plant roots itself. It's a fantastic way to help feed the soil, and just also aerates the soil a little bit as well. All the additional compounds that help makes that soil more rich is going to provide natural aeration and allow that soil to provide a much better end result for you, to the point of where after a couple of years of tilling that in, you only have to do it probably once a year or so, grow out a few mushrooms, till it in with compost tea here or there, and it'll provide some fantastic end results.
Now, we talked about all these great things, right? And we're going to skip right to Tim here, because we guess we're going to run out of time here real quick. We talk about all these health benefits, right? We talk about these studies, we talk about all these things and all these miracles that this plant has, and not just miracles, like there's studies, there's support for all these things, and we're not just talking out of our a-holes here, right? But we're talking about the FDA earlier and what was going on in Operation CBDC, which is what they're calling it, right? So we've seen an influx of the FTC and the FDA sending warning letters to CBD companies who allegedly made false or misleading health claims about their products. And these are things that we've discussed before. And here we are again talking to Kevin and the green nurses and the medical benefits of this plant. Tim, again, I mean, I know we beat a dead horse on this one, because this isn't the first time we talk about this, but again, we see this constantly over and over and over and over again. Do these guys have any?
I'm a vegan. Wait, I'm a vegan. Could we beat a broccoli plant, not a horse or something?
I'd love to.
No beating broccoli. I love broccoli.
I love broccoli.
Don't be mean to broccoli.
Sorry about that.
I mean, this all has huge implications on our industry, right? I mean, this is something that we talk about. It's majorly the scheduled issue that we discuss, right? But then we talk about Epidiolex and how they get away with this, right? Kevin, how do you feel about the headline like this?
I was too busy laughing at my own jokes. Can you, what headline exactly are we talking about?
Well, the big issue we're seeing in the industry right now, I was going to talk to Tim about this, was, what the impact that the FTC and the FDA are making right now is sending these warning letters out for false claims. And what is the right claims? And then we were talking about regulations earlier and how this all works, right? Tim has made a lot of really cool suggestions and is working with getting a lot of these things implemented in our legal systems here. So these are things that are concerns to me, right? Like, it's medicinal, right? Why can't we market it like other thing? But in your definition, from a scientific level, of somebody who's done the research, how does this make you feel?
Right. So, it's problematic, right? Because let's be real. I mean, pharmaceutical companies have a monopoly on treating disease. Whereas dietary supplements cannot treat disease. What they can do, however, is they can treat structure and they can treat function. So we call them structure function claims. So the dietary supplement industry is already there. They know how to handle structure function claims, whereas the cannabis industry is still learning, how do we word this? And it's really all about wording, as Tim will tell you. So, for example, you can't say treats high blood pressure. You can say supports cardiovascular health with hawthorn berry or something, right? So there's different ways to word this that are really key. How do I feel about it? I feel very badly about it. I mean, there's lots of things that we should be saying about certain dietary supplements that are actually have been shown to treat disease quite effectively. If you do a search on medicinal plants or phytochemicals or herbs in our National Library of Medicine, in PubMed, you'll get almost 1 million hits. Now, people say there's no research. So sorry, you're wrong. There is research out there. And as physicians, I respect what you do. It's important what you do, but you didn't learn about it in school. And that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It means that there's more to learn with any profession, right? So I think we should really keep that in mind as we look at other medicinal plants.
But there we go. It's like, here we go in that discussion that the research is there, right, Tim? I mean, this is where we kind of beat ourselves on the head, because what classifies as research? We see MIT and Yale and all these great schools doing research, privately funded research.
Who's funding the research? That's always the first question. Who's funding the research? And is there an agenda? Is the money there for a purpose? That any research, just like any advertisement, just like any review, just like anything, look at the source. Is this an unbiased opinion, or is this a funded project with a predetermined conclusion? I take a little bit different bet with the FTC, FDA enforcements. And first of all, it's one entity. The FDA is using the FTC as their enforcement arm because the FTC has a lot more experience in litigation, in prosecuting these type of false claims. So it's not like the FTC is on one tangent and the FDA is on the other. The FDA is in charge. They're utilizing the FTC, and they are going after medical CBD companies making medical claims. Sometimes that's a good thing. There are a lot of dishonest CBD actors out there right now. This will cure cancer. This will cure arthritis. This will cure dementia. And what the FDA is saying is, listen, we say you can't put this in food. You're putting it in food. All right, we're not going to hassle you. You can't put, you can't do a lot of things with CBD because we haven't figured it out. We haven't designated as grass, generally regarded as safe. But we know what's happening. We're not really going to cause any problems about it. But when you make a medical claim, when there's a risk that somebody will forego traditional medical treatment and instead use your product with the expectation that this will either be the same or better than traditional medical treatment, that's a problem, because that's putting public health at risk. We have not seen adverse CBD reactions from people. We're not, that we don't view that as a risk. This is we're viewed as a risk. And in some cases that's right, and in some cases that's wrong. That's one of the biggest things we work with our CBD clients. You cannot make medical claims. You cannot make medical claims. You cannot make medical claims. Don't even come close to medical claims. Well, can I put a testimonial on my, no, that's making a medical claim. And the FDA has been very clear about that. Don't make medical claims. I mean, they haven't hidden the ball. And they've gone after some of the most egregious actors. I've just read a bunch of those cases just settled out, actually. They're not looking to be hard asses. They're not looking to come in and arrest people. They are, in their mind, for better or for worse, looking at it as we want to protect public health and safety. And if people are foregoing traditional medical treatment in something that has not been fully analyzed to our satisfaction, we view that as putting themselves at risk of harm. So again, some products should be allowed because they are sincere. They are honest. They put the work, the time, the effort. They're well made. They're good. Others are throwing crap into a bottle and calling it CBD, and that is bad. And that's why I say the most important thing is standardization. And you know me, I don't drink. I'm not a big alcohol fan. In fact, I hate alcohol. What I love is being able to walk into a liquor store and look at a bottle of Absolute vodka and know it's 80 proof. Now I pick up a bottle of wine and know that it's 34 proof or 12.5 or 18.5, and I know my beer is 6.5% if I drink beer. And that when I walk into Indiana or when I walk into Texas or when I walk into Boston or when I walk into San Francisco into a liquor store and I see that bottle of Absolute is 80 proof, I know that's 80 proof. I know it doesn't have rubbing alcohol in it. I know it's not going to kill me. I know it's not going to make me blind. I know that's not going to be. That consistency is what the cannabis industry needs, both on the medicinal medical side as well as the adult use side, because that's going to bring that level and that ability to conduct these studies, that ability to know that not only dosage, but everything's going to be the same because we have a consistency, we have a standardization at a national level. That I think is going to bring a lot of this into focus, and it will be able to separate the good actors from the bad actors so that the FDA and the FTC can focus on those companies that truly do pose a risk to public health and not focus on those that don't pose a threat to public health.
Yeah. Well, this week we saw some interesting news, and we all talked about Mexico for a long time, and now we're talking about medicinal cannabis. The Mexico's Ministry of Health on yesterday, had made public rules for the medical cannabis industry available. So they're putting out their rules, their guidelines, and honestly, it looks like a great system where you can bring in seeds. There is home grow involved, and we've talked about the Mexican industry coming in, and looks like with crossing state lines and importing export deals and where that will be. Tim, what's going on in Mexico right now? And can you give us any updates? Because I believe
my law partner, a very close colleague in Cozumel, and now Mexico City. We just had a Zoom conference 2 days ago talking to them, and it is exciting. It's very exciting. It's going to be the second major country to legalize at the national level. Canada did it through a health model. With Health Canada, that was the basis of their legalization. Mexico's taking a different bet. They're taking on the social justice and constitutional freedoms bent. That's where the main, legal argument for legalization came through their Supreme Court. Now, it's been bumped a few times, and they're not rushing it. They're taking their time. I mean, there's a lot involved. Obviously the political scene in Mexico, when you start talking about potentially illegal drugs, is very different than from what it is in the United States. And they want, they are trying to do this and do it right. But it's based on the premise that the government doesn't have the right to tell you what you can do in the privacy of your own home. That very simplified. But that is much more. It's much more of the personal freedom legislation that's changed it than the health based, kind of model of Canada. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. And I think that, it's going to do a lot of good. I really do. How do you lower drug crime? How do you lower, the effects of prohibition? How do we end bootlegging and moonshining? And, when you make something available and legal and regulated, it takes away the economic incentive to have a black market. This is not rocket science. It should be very prohibition creates the negative impacts. Why do we have problems with drugs and heroin and methamphetamine? it's prohibition. Why do meth labs blow up? Because they have to be made clandestinely with shipshod, crappy ingredients that are volatile and kill people. If it was legal and regulated and sold in a controlled environment, then you would not have meth labs blowing up at harm reduction levels. And this is what I think that Mexico is finally getting. They've tried to fight the war on drugs down there with, military for the last decade. And what has it done? It's done nothing. You break one up and now there's 3, new cartels. But by eliminating that prohibition on these things, by removing the financial and economic incentive behind the black marketing, now you're hitting to the, well, okay, you can get it anywhere. Why do I exist?
Mhm.
So I hope we see some positive movement. The reality is there's still a lot of corruption in Mexico. We had a really great discussion about this. These 2 cannabis lawyers down there who reached out and kind of met us via Zoom during the pandemic. And now we've just been in constant contact every few weeks. They're just the greatest people in the world. I wish my Spanish was better. Their English is excellent. But it's fascinating to see. And I think that they're getting it. And, hopefully April now is when it's been bumped to, but we're seeing progress, like you said. Seeing regulations coming out or seeing kind of a framework get established. I would never say that should be rushed. What you don't want to see is these periods of delay and delay and delay where nothing's getting accomplished. that starts to get worrisome. But when you see the progress going, when you see these kind of well thought out and well discussed and plans moving forward, it just gets you really excited. We live in an immediate culture. We want everything right now, right now, right now, right now. But it's 16 months, 18 months out. It's not that long. And you take that time to do things right, and you have a model that can be used by other nations by moving forward.
So I mean, look, you hit every nail on the head that I wanted to make sure you hit, because it is a unique model. It's a great model. It's really modeled after a lot of the best that we've seen. And then when we're talking about the American models right now, what's interesting that I've seen in the last week was the New Jersey model that we've been hyping up for the last few weeks since the beginning of the year, since they actually went and voted it in. Now I see headlines this last week, Tim, that the New Jersey has blown up. It's sinking ship. It's a mess right now, and it looks like a few of these delays that you're talking about. What's going on in New Jersey? Are people just freaking out for no reason, or is this par for course?
I think this is just sensationalized headlines and a lot to draw, clickbait and get people's attention. Like anything, you're instituting an adult use market in a major metropolitan area that consists of 20 million people within a 200 to 300 mile radius between the New York metropolitan area and Jersey and Pennsylvania. You're trying to enact it legislatively, hybrid, but pretty much legislatively, which always involves compromise, as we saw here in Vermont. You're doing it on a massive scale. You're going to hit road bumps. You're gonna hit speed bumps. Things aren't done. Boom, 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 boom. Everyone's like, oh my God, it doesn't function perfectly the first minute it becomes in existence. Come on. Look at Massachusetts. Everyone's like, the first 6 months of their adult use rollout, it's a disaster, it's horrible, oh my God, it's going to hell, everything's doing it. 2 years later, things are growing and it's maturing like anything else. You have to take a 5-year time frame on these things. And Jersey's just getting going. It's not imploding. The law hasn't changed. They're squabbling about a few little minor things, but it will be implemented. It will be implemented by the end of the year. And you know what? It's going to have problems. It's going to have issues, and it's going to have supply chain problems, and it's going to have people, organized crime taking advantage of it. And there's going to be thefts, and there's going to be, some difficulties. Mm-hmm. And then, like any system, it will move past them. And there'll be headlines, oh my God, the sky's falling, oh my God, it's the end of the world. And, and 6 months later, it'll be different sensational headlines about something else. And we'll see that like any system in time, it moves forward, it grows, it adapts, it weeds out the problems, it emphasizes the good aspects. And we will see it grow, and just hope it doesn't become California. That's all.
Right, that's the big thing there is the California regime. But it's just really interesting. I'm glad you bring that up because, we've talked about the Canadian market, and there's a lot of people even there that are looking at now after 3 years in, or, going into the third year here, and seeing where they're at. And it's like you said, and we stress to people, especially within markets that have just become or have legalized a section of it, it doesn't mean you can go buy it tomorrow. It's just, the framework, the amount of work that has to go in there, the money, the hiring, the the paperwork that has to be even drawn up and certified to go, right, is tremendous. So, yeah, what's going on in New Jersey? It's just I have to agree.
Jersey
Like I
has an
said, it was
advantage.
nothing out of the ordinary for what we saw.
They have an advantage because they did have a well-laid medical program. They saw this. They began ramping up cultivation. They began ramping up regulation. They began, you know, before the vote. They saw it coming. They took some foundational steps. But there's still going to be issues. The juvenile, you know, penalties for juvenile possession, example, underage possession, which was one of the most recent things that got held up a little bit. And then they figured it out, like they will. So you know, I try to shy away from these sensationalized headlines. You know, a lot of these things are just, you know, wanting to get your attention so you can get more advertising time. You know, it's just things aren't falling. Jersey's going to be great. Jersey's going to lead the East Coast. It's going to create New York. It's going to push Pennsylvania, Virginia. Now Virginia is moving forward faster than I think anybody ever predicted. And that's, you know, at that point, it's the end game. It's the end game for national legalization. Once, you know, Florida has now over 400,000 medical patients. I mean, well, not much of your population is access to legal cannabis. What are you going to say? I got to be legal. You know, eventually it just that the whole stigma goes away. And once in Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, you know, it's going to be like dominoes. And that's what I'm excited to see too, because again, we get one step closer to that normalization. We get one step closer to that standardization and that acceptance beyond the stigma.
Well, last thing I want to talk to you about real quick before we get to Thomas and his segment and then wrap up the show, we'll get back to Kevin here for a few more things. But we talked about the new cabinet coming in, and you had talked about new cabinet picks and what the impact could be on cannabis from that nature. You know, a lot of clatter and things that I've read have basically said, you know, it's going to be a couple-year process. We might just get the SAFE and MORE Act passed. And what does this pick look like for us? I mean, I know it's a positive thing, I think, but in reality, what are we looking at here?
I wouldn't say just. If either of those acts passed, the Safe Banking Act or the MORE Act, either one of them would radically reshape the entire industry. Access to banking, access to normal banking like any other business, and perhaps the elimination of 280E. I can't tell you what that would do to the industry. And the MORE Act passing, likewise, would accomplish the same thing, which is basically remove all of the obstacles of federal illegality, which, as we talk about consistently, pokes their ugly little heads in every aspect of this industry. The domestic agenda is designed to turn slow. We don't make domestic policy, you know, easy to change. But with the 2 Senate wins in Georgia, which I've said I would have lost the House on that bet, and happily so, we now have the opportunity to move forward much quicker than we would have if Mitch McConnell remained Senate Majority Leader. There could be things at the federal level that will start shifting. Are we going to overnight legalize pot? No. Will a administration like Joe Biden's, who is not adamantly opposed to cannabis, be good? Yes. Will a attorney general who doesn't have a personal vendetta against cannabis be good? Yes. Will we have some, you know, cabinet member picks who have yet to be confirmed, but now will most likely be confirmed, voiced support for legalization? Yes. Has Kamala Harris come out and supported it? As much as a former prosecutor can? Yes. You know, these are all very good things, and it's much better than had the current administration continue. And I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I mean, it's going to be amazing to see where that shift comes and what that entails. But Kevin, before we wrap this up here and get to Thomas and his awesome Growers Guide segment with his coach, which he'll explain here to you guys in a minute, how do you feel about where we're at today? I mean, you've been in this industry a long time. You've been doing a lot of this research. You're the guy that's been behind a lot of what they say doesn't exist, right? How do you feel about where we're at and where we've come, and is it, you know, is it just patience from here on out? Is it you know, a DEA issue? How do you feel about what's going on and where we're at right now?
I'm actually really excited about where we are. I think we've made a lot of really great progress. There's obviously been some obstacles in the way, and I love what Tim just said about any system will adapt. This is what systems do. This is what life does, is it adapts as it grows. And so these systems, as many holes as they might have in them, will adapt and they'll get better and better. what I'm disappointed in is the DEA clinging firmly to their belief that cannabis is a Schedule 1 drug when there's just really not any research to support that. It doesn't, nobody has ever died from an overdose of cannabis. It is not Schedule 1. It does have medicinal value. It is not highly addictive. It's got much less addiction potential than alcohol if you really look at the stats.
Sugar.
So you know, I'm disappointed in the DEA, and now that I said that, my phone is tapped, but that's okay.
Right.
We're all done.
It's just really interesting to see all these different parts of government and how they conflict and how it's just all this hypocrisy that just goes back and forth. You know, it's like almost like it's designed to, hey, we're going to give these guys an inch, but we're not going to give them the mile. We're just going to give them enough to grease on that wheel to stop the squeak, and then everything else will just be strung along. It feels like for 4 years now, our government, our last administration has kind of been like, hey, we're gonna, and then look at us now, like a lot of us were even like, the last hurrah before they go, he's just gonna stick it to everybody and decriminalize, and you know, we're not gonna see that, right? And it really, in the current state of where we are at affairs in this country, as much as we wish we could have this conversation and we feel the need for it, right? I mean, we're in a pandemic, we got all these other issues, and you know, we constantly remind people that these senators and these congressional men and all of our lawmakers they have a pile full of things they have to get through, right? We just did the you know, they just shut down basically the Senate, right? And they're just doing some, you know, this impeachment stuff now, right? So it's even crazier where we're at when we talk about that, right? Which to me means more of the world needs to sit down and smoke a joint. But you know, as far as you know, we have the green nurses here, which is what blows my mind. We have medical support. We have Dr. Kevin Spelman here, who's done the tests that people say don't exist. That's why I love having you here. And I mean, I think everybody today has learned a lot, and we've had an impactful conversation with you, because you know, a lot of our thoughts and theories are either supported, which is what we hope to have, right? And we've learned something. So it's like, you know, when we talk about, you know, the crossover between, you know, medical and recreational, and how do we separate that? You know, we talk about cannabis and diets and mental health and all these other things that attribute to where we can be healthy. I mean, I've seen, again, like, you know, I look at Mark, I look around our panel, you know, I'm in the best shape I've been in my life. And a lot of it was focused on when I eat, what I eat, and how do I eat, right? So eating at, you know, 1 o'clock in the night, McDonald's or Burger King is not very, very healthy for me. And every morning I wake up, I'm reminded of that, right? And I'm sure most of us are. But, you know, to me, that's your body telling you something, right? So when we eat healthy foods and you know, it's like, it's where do you start? You know what I mean? Because I mean, right now, and we can have this conversation for hours, is, you know, people in COVID right now are going through depressions, and how do they kickstart a new me? You know what I mean? Where do I start? Whether it's mentally or food related, or just a hobby to keep my brain off of the depression that I'm in because I haven't seen my mom or my family. You know, we kind of hit on that a little bit earlier, how I can't go give Tim a hug, and I haven't seen Thomas in a while. You know what I mean? It's been a minute since I've seen Sherry, and I've yet to give Mark a hug personally myself. So, and then when we get back to the normal, what does that mean? And where do we go from there? Being somebody who's in the media industry, and somebody who's in the music industry, and somebody who's, you know, in the restaurant industry, as we talk about eating healthy and all these foods, like our restaurant industries are struggling, right? So it's more important now for people to go online and learn how to start that garden, which is amazing, because I've seen a lot of people personally that I know that I've never thought would start a garden have impactful gardens that they're utilizing this year, right? And not realizing how long we're going to be into this lockdown for, and how deep this lockdown is going to go. And now it looks like we're going into a worse second wave. You know, we have Dr. Bob, and there's a lot of medical research on the impact with COVID and what impacts that cannabis can have. I've been kind of neutral on it because I don't think there's enough really supportive evidence out there. There's a lot of maybes and coulds, in my opinion. But how do you feel even about you know, with what we're seeing on the COVID level?
Well, in terms of cannabis and COVID, you mean?
Yeah.
So I feel similarly. I feel like there's not really much supporting evidence, and it's a serious enough condition that we've got to be very prudent about the steps we take in using anything with it. But I can tell you this is strictly my opinion, but given the extraordinary anti-inflammatory pathways that CBD affects, and there are numerous pathways. I'm not talking about just COX inhibition or, one or two pathways here, NF-kappa B, whatever. I'm talking about really a high number of pathways that, and by the way, curcumin does the same thing, or curcuma, turmeric. They both have this extraordinary anti-inflammatory activity that reduces inflammatory cytokines. So from my perspective, if I was in the hospital treating COVID, in that stage where people start going into a cytokine storm, and this just kind of blows them up in days and they die, I would be using cannabidiol. I'd at least give it a try in a few patients and see if it was strong enough to actually squelch that or attenuate that cytokine storm. But in the early stages, I just want to make it really clear, in the early stages, I would not be using cannabis.
Well, what cannabis?
I wouldn't want to be using THC. I wouldn't want to be using a CB2 agonist in the early stages. In the later stages where the inflammation just starts taking over, especially in older people, I would definitely consider it then.
That's awesome. That's interesting. And then there's scientific backing right there to my receptors. One last thing before I go to Thomas, and Thomas might be interested in this question as well. There's news bouncing around about there might be another receptor, right? Receptor 3, right? So tell me more about this. Is this something that is just a lot of talk and we don't really know yet, or is there something to this? Do we have a third receptor? Oh, did you get that?
Are you waiting for Thomas or me? Sorry.
Oh, no, I was waiting for Kevin there.
Oh, sorry. So CB3. Yeah, there's a putative CB3. GPR55 is its technical name. G protein coupled related 55. Yeah, I think it's a CB3. Just the problem is nobody really fully understands what it does yet. And I think what we're going to find is a CB4, and I think we're probably going to find a CB5 if you really dig into the research and look at it. There's other G protein coupled related receptors that look like they also have pretty active lives in the endocannabinoid system. GPR 119 is another one. So let's look at it this way. There's over a dozen serotonin receptors. And yet the endocannabinoid system seems to be more profound than the serotonergic system. So I think we're going to find many more receptors.
No, it's amazing because I've read about it. We've asked a few people that didn't really have an answer to that question. They were just like, well, we don't really know. And it's like, it's interesting to understand that. I mean, the possibilities are endless, right? Because again, it's just such a new science and such new research that we're realizing where this endocannabinoid system can go and what it does, right? Science is amazing. I love it. Every day we're learning something new. It's great. I can't wait for the government to finally support the research that's out there, or the funding to establish research on a level that can just keep pushing this envelope, right? Because we're seeing it all over the world, and we're just now. I feel like the United States, we're falling behind, right? Israel's going crazy. We got China going nuts in the hemp industries. Mexico's coming up. Canada's off and rolling in every aspect that you could want to be in. And here we are still struggling and just on a state level, and we can't give medical claims to anything that surrounds cannabis, right? Even if it's from, like you said, Tim, any sort of documentation, any sort of anything that anybody can read that gives you, it's all in wording, right? But still, at the end of the day, that sucks that we have to be in this kind of situation when, again, we can show evidence. We can show how this can cure cancer. We can teach you about RSO. We can talk about FICO. We can talk about THCs and doses and mixtures and combinations. And Thomas can tell you how to grow at home, and all these great things. But until we get all these legalizations and things can open up, it's on a limited basis. The education's out there, but you have to find it. No one really believes in it. It's hard to find a doctor and people within the industry that we get our information from and trust and support every day to support cannabis, right? This is our biggest issue. We went back to the doctors here, which to me, it's like, the only person anybody trusts is lawyers and doctors, right? And lawyers I don't get.
Nobody trusts lawyers.
Only when you need your lawyer do you want to trust your lawyer, right? But I mean, doctors, right? Because I mean, you guys are the ones that everybody turns to every time we're sick. Where do we go? A doctor, right? I mean, nobody loves a dentist, but when we go see our doctors, typically we listen to what they say, right? So if you have a doctor that's out there that's uneducated, who doesn't believe in cannabis, who's unwilling to be open-minded, now that's not to say that what they know is not correct, but we have to be open-minded enough to keep educating ourselves and pushing, which to me is what doctors should be doing, right? Keeping up with the literature, keeping up with these things. I've read crazy articles about what nurses are required to do versus doctors, and how they need to keep up with certain things and the differences there. So, and it's voluntarily or it's put there, right? I mean, a lot of this continuing education is voluntarily done by doctors, correct?
Yeah, it is. In fact, we run, I'll just plug it now, for CanMed in LA. Every year we run a CME course for physicians. Dustin Sulak, myself, Dr. Bonnie Goldstein, and a couple other, and we have a nurse there as well. So that's a great course. We get great reviews for it. It goes really well. And it's fascinating for me watching docs. It's mostly docs, it's not all docs, but it's mostly docs, and watching the lights go on, watching their eyes change while they're realizing, oh my God, there really is a lot of research on this. There's something here. I want to bring up an earlier point that you made that I think is important for us to remember. And that is, scientists get paid to see the trees, not the forest. And so, because that's their perspective a lot of the time, they're very hesitant to comment on what could be. However, as they get older and their hands aren't in the lab anymore, but they're analyzing a lot of data, they start to see the forest. And as they see the forest, they start to get more and more ideas about what's possible. And I feel like that needs to be a really good balance between seeing the trees and seeing the forest. And I think physicians get into this same issue. As they get older, they start seeing the forest more. So it gives you a different perspective to be able to do both. You need to be able to drill down sometimes on diseases and how they operate and how to attenuate that. But you also need to be able to look at what's possible. What's the philosophy behind this? What if there's a CB3? Could there be a CB4? Right. So I think all of this is really, really key for scientists. People trained professionally in a way of thinking. You have to break out of that thinking. One of the fascinating things that always amuses me is that a lot of the breakthroughs that have happened in particular fields have happened by people from outside the field. Because they're not thinking one way, the way everybody else is thinking in that field, right? They come in with a new perspective. And I think perspectives are really key. I think perspectives, as I mentioned earlier, are key to health, mental health, and physical health as well. But attitude, perspective, right? What do you see when you look out in the universe? Einstein once asked the question, somebody actually asked Einstein the question, what is the most important question that you can ask? And this is after World War II. You know what he said? He said, the most important question you can ask is the universe a safe place? And if you say no to that, I guarantee you that your perspective is potentially going to make you sick. And if you say yes to that, I guarantee you that your attitude and your perspective is potentially going to help you stay well.
Well, that's a great thought right there too, actually. When you put in perspectives, man.
Perspective consciousness. Cannabinoids open up our consciousness to process emotions, thoughts, images, stories from a different place, right? So my own experience when I was sick and suffering and dying, like I felt, used cannabis. It opened up my head. I was pulled out of the trajectory and the story of sickness and illness. I was able to see something from a bit bigger perspective. And basically it was like the aha moment when that box disappeared, where there was no longer a box for me to think outside the box. That's what plant medicine has done for me. And that's what we're trying to do with other health professionals. We're trying to help them to eliminate the box that says you must think outside the box.
Well,
Beautiful.
I appreciate having everybody on today. I'm gonna sign off now, and we're gonna play Thomas's piece because I don't want to miss it because it's a great piece. But I don't want to keep you guys on here an extra 10 minutes because we're going way over time already. But I want to thank everybody for coming on today. Again, Mark, it's a pleasure having you on with us as well.
Always a pleasure, Jeff.
Sherry, amazing segment again this week, guys. This morning talking about decarboxylation, vitamin B12s, and not only how cannabis relates to it, but like how just again we're talking about diets. Our whole conversation ties right into kind of what your segment was all about today. Again, if you guys want to catch their segments, which we have Terpene Tuesdays, and you have a bunch of different things every morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time, East Coast time. You guys can catch the Green Nurse live on all their social media outlets as well. And then on Wednesday nights, you guys also have another show, which is tonight. So plug your show really quick.
So basically 2021, oh shoot, I'm frozen. I'm frozen.
Oh, but you
I'm
look
frozen.
good. You
Still
look
okay,
frozen, babe.
Okay, so here we go. So 2021 is the year
There
of
you
the
are.
nurse.
Yeah.
Here we go. So 2020 was the year of the nurse to celebrate the 200th birthday of Florence Nightingale. So 2021, the World Health Organization made the year of the nurse again in 2021. So what we're doing throughout the year is we're going to profile cannabis nurses and basically talk about what propelled them to come into the industry, how they became cannabis nurses. And we're going to illuminate what they're doing in this industry to decrease stigma around using this plant. So that's our show tonight. We're going to have one of our nurse practitioners on.
Oh, can't wait.
Awesome.
It's gonna be an amazing show. Kevin, again, I can't say enough to thank you for being on the show. Timothy, again, your perspective on everything. Yeah, no, I'm trying to get everybody off now so we can drop in Thomas here. But again, thank you, Timothy. Vermont Cannabis Solutions. If you guys have any legal questions or perspectives or need to know knowledge, highly suggest Vermont here. And again, thank you for being on today. A lot of great information, and we talk about. I know we talk about the same things a lot, but we never know who's listening. And literally every week we just keep reading the same thing over and over again from a different perspective or from a different angle or from also another different issue, right? Because it's whether somebody got arrested, whether it's an FDA fine, whether it's something that we talk about all the time, because we don't want to put people in a position where they're going to end up putting themselves in a legal issue, whether it's growing in your house too many plants, whether it's an extraction thing that you're doing. Thomas, we talk about trying to stay within legal limits all the time and everything he does. And there are farms out there that are doing all the great things that we need to be done out there. And there are other farms out there that, like we talk about, they're cutting corners, they're going after the capital. And unfortunately, we don't have the systems in place to regulate all that. So right before we get to Thomas here, I'm going to sign off with Kevin. But Kevin, again, thank you for coming on. One of the things we never even talked about was the
extraction
Spelman Report. Right, your own show, which is
the Spelman Report. Right. So the Spelman Report, basically phytopharmacology review. We go through medicinal plants, but also nutrients, but mostly medicinal plants, and look at the first section of it is education. The second section of it is an interview with a clinician or scientist or researcher to keep you up to date for good clinical outcomes. Also, you can check us out at Facebook, the Spelman Report there.
Awesome, man. Because you're doing great things, and I can't thank you enough for the work that you put into all this, and being able to come on the show and sharing your experience with us. Because again, we talk about the medical stigma that we have. We need more doctors, we need more nurses, we need more people that are willing to do this research independently, and it takes a lot to do it, like you said, and we've all mentioned the stigma of coming out of the closet, for instance, right? In essence, up until a couple of years ago, none of us could really say the word cannabis, right? Unless we're somewhere weird where else we're going to join, like, you smoke. Oh, okay.
When I started my business, I was still working a full-time job in a white collar position, and I was interviewed by a local paper, and I specifically asked the reporter to leave my current employer out of it. And it was in the very first paragraph of the article. So,
Wow.
it was definitely, that was my coming out party, I guess you'd say.
Well, again, really none of us are here without you guys, really, in essence, especially from the medical community and the support that we have from you guys and the shows that you guys are providing, the content that you give to us, and your knowledge that you're sharing. That a lot of people could just keep to themselves and not educate people, but we all realize the importance of it. We're all here every week trying to do it. So guys, please go out, support the Green Nurse. Please go out and watch the Spelman Report, because you have some great guests, man, which I was really excited to see, because Ethan is somebody I've been trying to get on the show for years now. And we all know Ethan Russo is not an easy guy to get on any sort of network unless you're really close friends with him. And like I said, I had a chance to pick his brain when he was out here in Vermont for the medical conference, which was absolutely amazing. And like I said, I can't talk about the entourage effect enough, especially when it comes down for patients, because it's a different experience, it's a different feeling. It's your body actually fixing itself. I can't even say it any better than that, right? So that being said, thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to plug really quick while we have you here?
No, just great to be here. Great to be with like minds and some brilliant minds. And I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Well, completely humbled by that, Kevin. And again, thank you for sharing your time. This is education that you can't, ask for. And please, if anybody wants to get, the extraction notes or anything like that I rant and rave about all the time, email me. I still have them. I'll give them out, because I'm sure Kevin doesn't mind. Sharing knowledge with education. Now, Thomas, we're going to go to Thomas really quick, who's I'm a big fan favorite of, my grow coach here, who's not only a coach, he's not only a businessman, he's not only an entrepreneur, but he's also a patient. And he's deeply rooted in with our grassroots organizations, right? And he provides us with our growers guides every week, and they're phenomenal. So I don't know, Kevin, if you ever seen him or anything like that, but we, grow tips. So Thomas, let's talk about this week a little bit. You put a new flair onto it, which I love, and you have a new character joining you every week now, I've seen. So
I do. So a couple of years ago, a few years ago now, when I first started Vermont Grow Coaching, I just had a generic logo. A good friend of mine, Craig Shorey, who is a graphic design artist, actually created Coach for me. Coach is, an image of myself maybe when I was a little bit younger. I'd say he's a heck of a lot more handsome than I am now. But in any case, he is a cartoon representation of what I represent in the cannabis community. So I've decided to start incorporating him as a cartoon character in the Growers Guide segments. So this segment I've sort of shortened up a little bit and went with a little bit of a different take than we normally do. And I sort of gave him the reins, and we'll see where he goes with it.
Oh, here we go, guys. If I can figure this all out without tripping over myself again this week. Here we go with the Vermont Grow Coaching Growers Guide this week.
Hey guys, Coach with Vermont Grow Coaching here. Tom couldn't make it today, so I'm going to rock it. Let's go. All right, so today we're talking CBN. That's right, the couch lock cannabinoid. Let's go. Okay, CBN. All you got to do, take your THC, put it at 325 degrees Fahrenheit for an hour and a half. Guess what? You just turned your THC into CBN. Woo! So let's take a look at how it works. So it's super easy. Just preheat your oven to 325 degrees. Then you put your bud or your oils, whatever you got going on, you put your THC in that oven for 1 hour and 30 minutes. That is it. That's all you got to do. You're going to convert most of your THC to CBN. This is going to be fantastic for helping you sleep at night, as well as helping you relax. If THC is too much for you and you need a little bit of CBN in your diet, this is one way you can do it at home. So that's it. It's super easy. That's all there is to it. If you guys have any questions or concerns, make sure to check out VermontGrowCoach.com. Tune in next week for another episode of Growers Guide when Tom is back in the office. Until next time, have a great week, everybody. No, Coach, no. Completely irresponsible. That is not okay. You can't just go along freaking throwing out information at people and disappearing. You need to give them more information. Details, I tell you. You can't just say CBN is the couch lock cannabinoid. Screw that. No. CBN does so many more things other than make you tired. It helps as a neuroprotectant. It helps with anti-inflammatories and so many other things. In fact, it's one of the fantastic cannabinoids that makes up the full spectrum effect. So one of the reasons I love CBN is the fact that when I am using cryogenically cured cannabis, my THC is not converting to CBN as it otherwise would during my normal drying and curing process. So even my indica strains are going to end up not making me feel as tired as I'd like to feel. So being able to convert some of that THC to CBN, that's going to help knock me out and help me get a much better sleep at night, as well as help with the arthritis, pain, and inflammation that I'm otherwise going to be feeling on a daily basis. So, Coach, that is actually the type of information that you're supposed to provide in one of these segments. Let's get it right next week. See ya.
Someday we'll get all this figured out and this streamlined, right? As we're working on all these multiple projects and things that we're all doing and expanding our horizons as we hope to hear. Again, guys, thank you guys for all a great show. What an amazing man Kevin is, right? For you guys have known me for a while, I've been ranting and raving about him. So hopefully we didn't disappoint with our educational session today. As I'd like to say, hopefully we open up a lot of eyes and ways we look at things. Like you guys preach every day. Kevin kind of falls right in line with everything we promote, that we preach, that we push here on the show. Whether you're recreational or you're medicinal, right? They're all easy things that you can do every day and make part of your lives. Like, you know, he nailed a bunch of great things, even from a culinary standpoint: turmeric, gingers, cannabis, rosemaries, all these things that can interact with your body so well. But then again, guys, I think that's all we got. Anybody else have anything to add this week? Thomas, you want to do a sign off? Where can we find you, buddy?
As always, you can find me at vermontgrowcoach.com, Facebook, Instagram, Cannabuzz, LinkedIn, Masters of Cannabis, YouTube, and you can contact me directly at 802-342-5381.
Mark's got this going, because you guys got a show going up, guys, here shortly. So it's the year of the nurse, right? So let's have some support. Let's all tune into the Green Nurse this evening. Again, guys, thank you for tuning in. Coming up soon, we have Beth Waterfall, we have Bobby Nuggs, we have Danny Danko, we got a bunch of other people in the mix. Hopefully we can get these guys signed up to come on board to do a show. I believe we're going to do the Canna Nun. I got to talk to Sherry about that as well.
Oh yeah,
her
and said she would come on. Absolutely, hands down. She had a blast. She loves this.
Oh yeah.
This is what she said. She goes, I feel like I'm contributing again, not only to my church, but to helping people. So
again,
amen.
Absolutely.
Influencers that, when we talk about people that we really turn to in times of needs, like our doctors, it's, you know, whoever our religions are and our clergy people are, and whoever's involved in what we believe in there, right? So that I can't wait for that show as well, because that's going to bring us in. I got so many questions to ask. And not only is she a nun, but she's an elder nun, right? So she's been through the prohibition. She's been through all those ranks, especially from, you know, a religious side of things, because I would imagine it can't be any less strict. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And what inspired her to give cannabis a try? You know, obviously I've heard her story when she interviewed with you guys, which is an amazing story. But her reaction to what it did for her is amazing, right? Because now, like you said, she just wants to help educate and share with people her story, because it's an amazing story. And we need more stories like this every week. So I can't wait to get all these guys on. Huge shout out to Mendo Dope. Quick plug for the music on all the tracks we're using now. And they have a new track coming out, Legends, which we played at the beginning of the show. You guys dropping on the 1st of next month, so you guys can catch that. It has talked about a lot of the guests we've had on the show and being a legend in our industry, you know, changing lives and being an activist. Go out there, guys. You want to be into the medical field, which I did have a message today about. Reach out to the Green Nurses if you guys want to learn how to grow and establish a farm and get something up and going, whether it's CBD or THC, indoors, outdoors. Reach out to the Grow Coach, Thomas. He's blowing up and going everywhere, all over New England now. And hopefully soon we'll have a segment brought to you guys about a little month-to-month, week-to-week action about what it's going to take to pull off a grow and how you can establish and get your own system and set up very cheaply, very easily, and anybody can do it, from recreational to medical. How to put a tent in your home and to run a grow, because I know it can be intimidating for a lot of people. There's money that gets involved, so there's a little bit of pressure there. What happens if it doesn't go right? Who do you call, right? So we're going to walk you guys through that from a medical side, from a grow coach side, and hopefully you guys will enjoy that. A lot of great things coming up, guys. We'll see you next week. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Great show.